Okay, everybody, welcome to our budget work session. Today is Thursday, November 19th, 2020. I want to welcome my fellow council colleagues and our solicitor, Kevin Hayes, Mayor Cognetti, Business Administrator Carl Deely, and Fire Chief John Judge. So before we get started, I do want to say a couple things. First of all, I said this Tuesday, I really appreciate the ability to have this forum with the mayor and the business administrator, openly and honestly discussing the budget. And in my opinion, this is the way that government is supposed to work, good government, at least. So, Mayor and Mr. Deely, your willingness to come here and answer questions, defend your budget and the thought process behind what you're trying to do here is very refreshing to me, and I think it's very good for the city. So while we may end up, all of us may end up disagreeing in one way or another, or looking at something a different way, I think we all appreciate the fact that, you are here and you are going to answer questions. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Gahan. I appreciate you saying that.
Yes, thank you very much. And it's a change. I don't think in recent memory there's been a time where this has happened. Not only once that you've come, but twice now, and are willing to answer questions about your budget. So I do appreciate that. All right. So the way that I'd like to run this work session, as I mentioned on Tuesday, just to keep us on topic and move through different categories, is I'd first like to, I'll turn it over to you, Mayor and Carl, if you want to make an opening statement. And then what I'd like to do is go through, I know council has questions on revenue, the expenditure side of things, non-departmental expenditures. And then what I'd like to do is just move through each department in the budget. So really, we're just following the layout, the way the budget is laid out now, which I think makes sense. So I'll turn it over to you, Mayor, and Mr. Deely, if you have anything you want to say off the bat, and then we'll get right into questions from council.
Sure. Just as we talked about last week, we updated the narrative since then for our final submission on Monday, and it's really kind of laid out here. And some of the sections are obviously bigger than others, but next year is about recovery. It's also about restructuring and aligning with a plan so that we can really unlock our potential for the future. So we're trying to do a lot of things at once, but as we said, we can't just kind of stand still and wait for the economy to recover to do the things that we need to do at the city. And at the foundation of everything that we're doing, and I know is near and dear to everyone on this call, and why you guys ran for office yourselves, is because you care about the city and you want to make sure the residents here are safe and that their taxpayer dollars are spent wisely, and that over time we're able to tax less, tax differently, so that we are more and more attractive to new residents, new businesses, expanding businesses, and really creating that city that we all want to see for ourselves and for our children. So that's the basis for everything, is that public safety element and that growth that we all want to see. So we'll kind of walk through all of the revenue items and the budget, but that's underneath everything is those top lines.
Okay, thank you. So what I'd like to do now, for those of you who are following along at home, and if anyone has the budget in front of them, we'll start off by going through and asking any questions about the revenue side of things, and that would be pages 28 to 32. So I'll start off just with two questions, two of the bigger questions that we had on Tuesday, and then we'll open it up to council members on the revenue side. Now, I know you updated or changed some of the projections. One of the ones that stuck out to me that was a quite significant change from what we saw last week to this week was the delinquent real estate tax. You originally had that in from $600,000, and then when we received the final version of the budget, was $2,300,000. So can you just explain what changed so significantly there? Or what were your what was the thought process behind that?
Absolutely. So obviously, when we first started looking at this budget, we were looking into the second wave of COVID, and the expectation was with the unemployment rates, I think, continuing to go across into the first half of next year, that the delinquencies that we were seeing would probably actually get worse. And but actually, what we're seeing is we had some more information come in. We've had some more obviously revenues come in. It's tracking well, and also talking with other municipalities and obviously working with PAL. Yeah, I think we are understated, and I think when we started going into this budget, the intention was to be very conservative. So we did understate, and also in terms of the organisational changes, we are bolstering up our collections capability. So we're partnering with single tax office on some activities, but also within our own legal departments as well. We put a resource in there which is going to be specifically looking at delinquencies as well. So we thought that A, it was understated. B, that we're better prepared going into next year. We'll be better organised in order to go after those delinquencies. And the other piece too, of course, is that the real estate market generally seems to be holding pretty well. So we had a bit of an uptick here in Scranton. Obviously, we're going against the grain, I think, compared to maybe some other areas. That seems to be pretty consistent. From what we hear, the market is obviously in double digits in terms of increase versus last year. And consequently, I think we're going to have a reasonable year going through next year in terms of the real estate as a whole.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question, Mayor and Carl, would be on one of the big things we talked about on Tuesday when we were discussing the budget was obviously the plan that you have, or the options that you have in here to close the gap in terms of revenue for next year. So one of the options that you have is that a cash collateral restructure. You want to utilize cash collateral from sewer sale proceeds or other financing, which would require restructuring. And according to what I read, this came after a conversation with our city's financial advisor, PFM.
That's correct.
We have more detail on that. What does that look like? Where it says or other financing, are you able to put a hard number on that? What does the restructuring look like? I think we need more detail on that.
Absolutely, and PFM, they're continuing to work on some options for us, but certainly as we are today, it's really taking advantage of the short-term indexes, right, which are an all-time low right now, and that's going to continue, we believe, through next year. So the idea being that, really looking at some of our loans, some of our outstanding debt, is to restructure those, and to obviously extend that debt, and then take out cash options in there. So obviously to give us that free cash. The other option is to do these combinations, right, of the refinancing, and to kind of take advantage of the available excess funds that came from the DLI,
workers' compensation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So that's the.
But it's not workers' compensation money.
It's not. It's
excess reserve that was.
It's excess reserve. Yes. But yes, we do. We can actually provide, if you like, some of the workings behind that in terms of what funds would be available to us and what the costs would be going forward. But really the core of it is, with the current interest rates as they are now, and those are projected through next year, is that extending current debt that we have, and there would be very little penalty going forward. So yeah, but we can certainly provide that information. In fact, I can probably send that to you this evening, so you can take a look at that in terms of the detail of what we've got.
Yeah, that'd be great. And is there a number on that yet? Like on what sort of revenue or what sort of money we would see from that?
Well, it would be, the restructuring would be toward whatever that gap is looking like. So if it's $4.5 million, or as we're hoping these revenues come surprise to the upside, maybe we don't need to finance $4.5 million. Maybe it's $2 million. It would all depend on what the actual realized revenues look like? So what we're saying, so in the budget, what we're saying is it would be up to 4.5 million, but the exact dollar figure would really depend on how our revenues start coming in as the year goes on, and what a deficit looks like.
Yes. The intention, if you can, is obviously not to pull the trigger on this, right, unless we really have to. And then the timing of it, what we're looking at is, potentially it would be kind of second quarter, maybe into the third quarter. But the idea, as the mayor said, is that it's to only use this if we really have to do that. And I think, and that's the other thing, is the way, if we are doing debt restructure, we've got time to kind of work with institutions on that, and it doesn't have to be done immediately. But also we'd have to obviously keep monitoring what's going on in the short term in order to do things in a timely way. And that's obviously where our partner, PFM, obviously that's what they can do for us.
And I believe they're coming to your meeting on Tuesday. Tuesday, is that right?
I think so. Yeah, for the TAN.
So we talked to them and they sent us their latest analysis, which we can share, and then they said that we could speak about that on Tuesday. We could do a deeper dive.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Carl,
Yep, I'm here. Sorry.
can you give me give us that mechanism? So that would go into budget as a line item, and then we would. I mean, there's enough funds to refinance to make up to 4 million.
Yes. Yeah, that's I think in terms of it'd be an item that we put in there, but in terms of actually triggering that's something, obviously, again, we'd have to go through council, obviously, in terms of whether we actually put that into action, because we may not need to.
Yeah, so Councilperson Schuster, it appears in your inter-fund transfers at the bottom of page 28.
Yep.
And so that it would be A, B, or C, really, is what we're looking at, and B being, I mean, honestly, option A, of course, is that revenues come in, and we come in like they would have had we not had this pandemic, and maybe we didn't have to do any of this, but yeah.
That's C, that DLI, is that what it is? DLI excess reserve. That's the trust that we're.
The Department of Labor and Industry. Yeah, that's the excess reserve. That's right. It's being returned to us.
Right, and I know that the it is confusing. I know the initial reporting was that it's workers' comp money. It's not, and the detail is in your overview. In years past, many years predating all of us being active in local government, the workers' compensation fund in the city was not funded and not well run. So the state had the city hold back more reserve because they couldn't. It seemed like they weren't doing a good job on their own. And this is a credit to the prior administration. Over time, they got that, a couple of administrations actually, over time they got that workers' comp fund funded up to what it needs to be, which it still is today. So in 2019, the Department of Labor and Industry agreed to return that excess reserve to the city. I believe Solicitor Hayes, you got the letter from Solicitor Eskra about that. So those funds aren't sitting there waiting for workers' comp claims against the city. What we'd like to do, and we will do with at least a portion of them, when Treasurer Sheridan can open that account, we'll start that OPEB trust, which is what the Department of Labor and Industry recommended. You don't have to use it for those for a trust. We would like to, had the pandemic not hit, back when Pat Sheridan was the BA, he and I were going to start to open that account, but once the pandemic hit, I didn't think it was responsible for us to let go of unrestricted funds when we didn't know, sitting here in November of this year, if we'd be furloughing more and more people as opposed to sitting where we are, which is in much better shape than we feared. So those are there. Again, it's excess reserve return to the city. I just wanted to clarify that a little bit more.
And I reviewed the correspondence from the Department of Labor and Industry, and they confirmed that there were excess funds that were in the workers' compensation trust that were held by Penn Security Bank. The Bureau of Workers' Compensation indicated that those funds could be released, and there was no restriction on their use. So I did review that correspondence, and Solicitor Eskra sent correspondence memorializing her conversations with the Bureau, which further confirmed that there was no restriction placed on those funds after they were returned. So that's what we have to do.
I'm sorry, I just have a quick question. So I realized, and I saw the information provided for a Solicitor Hayes, but I know it says there's no restrictions, and that's we kind of got to that place now, but it was recommended to somebody go in that fund. So if you're going to use either the combo refinance or the financial restructuring, some of that money is going to end up in there. Am I understanding that? It's just not determined how much.
So in the narrative, I put in, and we asked the treasurer to open. So the trust doesn't exist. We need to open one. So I asked Mary Jo Sheridan to figure out how we open that account so that we can put in the balance of what we don't project to be a deficit. So we can start that account with $1 million and change. So we start that, probably in the beginning of 2022, open that account, get the trust started. And then as we go through next year, hopefully this time next year, we're sitting here not having to have tapped that. And we could then, beginning of 2023 or end of 2022, put that balance of $6 million in there to start that off. That is absolutely what we'd like to see. Again, I don't want to handcuff us when things are so uncertain. So we're looking forward, we're trying to be conservative. I don't think it'd be responsible if we took unrestricted funds, cash that's sitting there, and put it away, and then found ourselves 6 months from now in a position where we had to stop, close firehouses or furlough police officers like some cities are having to do. So I just don't want to tie our hands in that way.
When it comes to the restructuring or refinancing, like I said, if this is the route that's going, or if this is going to be a portion of it. So you're saying maybe this money here will be a portion, and then the restructuring, refinancing may be another portion.
Right.
It's going to go in the budget as a line item.
Yeah.
And when we reach that point in time where we need this, that's when that restructuring or refinancing will be done. Like, fill me in on that mechanism, how that occurs.
Yeah, so obviously on an ongoing basis, we'll be obviously monitoring, the receipts of funds, and at the same time, we'll also be looking forward. We've already been talking to our partner about this. PFM is obviously then looking forward to understand the timeline that we need to put in place in order to put this into action. So, for example, this is just kind of hypothetical because I don't know the actual details yet. But let's say, we get to May, June, and we find out that maybe things are not turning out the way we thought they would do, and we agree, we get the legislation done, and we need to make a trigger, to trigger this. We need to know that it's going to take us, let's say, 30 days, right, from the point we get council approval. It's going to be 30 days until funds will be available. So we've got to monitor that timeline, I think, as we go into next year.
Yeah. So I mean, if things continue as planned, do you kind of have a timeline as if things are going exactly as they are today? Do we know what quarter, what month it's going to be that we're going to need to do that?
Most likely it would be it will be probably in the third quarter.
This year was really August, where August was the receipts that we were getting in August were really what we were hinging on.
Yeah.
That after we got those, and we talked with you guys after that, we felt a lot better after those August receipts.
Yeah.
So I think it would end up being that third quarter of next year.
Yeah, there's a lag, right? So I think when we started talking about the kind of the revised revenues outlook, we were looking for that late August, September timing, right, to get the confirmation of what was coming in from that second quarter.
And I mean, right now, our interest rate's good on some of these things at this point in time. I know we're looking at the TAN, we're looking at the TRAN there, and the interest rates are good. So if we're going to do something like this, right now, the interest rates are good.
They are. They're very good. And again, I can send this I'll send this on to council if they can see it. So we've actually got some interest outlooks that we updated today. So I can send that on to council so you can see where we're at.
Yeah. So I mean, where I'm going with that is, like, do you see interest rates falling lower than they are right now at any point in time in the next 5 years?
Well, we're pretty much an all-time low, and when you look at the data, and we've even kind of got some, in terms of globally, we've now got some monetaries actually going into negative, and it really is kind of unsurpassed at the moment. So I think what I'd say, we probably won't see anything much lower. It really can't go much lower unless we go negative. But I think we're pretty confident that going through next year, yeah, we're not going to be seeing, we're not going to be seeing rates that are kind of above that, that kind of 2% mark. So, we're right now, we're extremely low. It's, money's very easy to come by at the moment.
Yeah. So if we're looking at that, I mean, is it at a point right now that can it drop any lower that we would redo this process anytime in the next 5 years, would you say? Or it's at a point so low that it wouldn't even be feasible to do it?
Well, it's always something we should do. I think anyway, we should always be looking at the possibility of restructuring, right? Any debt that we have, because that's just a good policy anyway. But yeah, I mean, potentially it could be. Yes, it could be something. It should be something we should consider. I think as we go through any normal year. Yeah.
And I think that if we look back at the financial crisis in 2009, rates stayed very low to try to attract, try to build back up the economy, try to encourage, businesses to lend, or businesses to open, banks to lend. I would guess that the interest rates will stay low for quite some time as the economy overall recovers.
So I'm saying, you're saying it's at about 2% right now?
Well, it's actually lower than that. But look, as an example, like 2018, 2019, the 10s that we had, we paid, it was like 3.65, 3.7. So yeah, it's the time we're in right now. It's extremely low, and will it go any lower? I think possibly, yeah. But
now how many percentage points do you think it would need to drop in order for it to be worth doing that again?
Well, yeah, in terms of the fees that you pay to actually do the transactions, and it's a good question. That's maybe a computation we can do. Off the top of my head, I couldn't answer that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the school district, as the mayor knows, the school district put itself in a position where they took out money at a certain point in time when the interest rates were high, and they found themselves in a position that yearly they had to make these types of transactions just to stay afloat. And I don't want to see us get in a position where we're bi-yearly, we're paying these fees over and over again. And I mean, what you're saying about the interest rate, it seems pretty good at this point.
Has to be, the opportunity cost has to be worth it. The cost benefit has to be worth it.
Yeah.
And at this point in time, you're saying that it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions from any council members on the revenue pages 28 to 32?
I have a few on the revenue. So there was a change in the real estate millage. Could you explain the process and how that was done?
More in the split between the real estate and the improvements. Yeah. So what we did.
Yes. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah, the actual millage rate itself didn't change. So what we did, we just basically looked at the history in terms of what we'd seen since like 2018 and onwards. And just in terms of the receipts, they were kind of really out of proportion in terms of what we were actually seeing. So what we did, we looked at we were looking at the receivable rates, and we adjusted it around that. So it was really just to kind of get it in line. So the line items were tracking more realistically to what we were seeing.
Yeah, I'd say that if you look at the land millage line, the operating budget in 2020 was 19 million, but the receipts are 9 million. So we adjusted, we rebalanced between land improvement millage and land millage to really be focused on how they come in.
So was there any sort of analysis done into like some sort of sampling of whether or not by doing this you inadvertently increase or decrease, someone's individual taxes?
No, there's no effect to citizens at all. No, it didn't change there's no ordinance on that.
Well, yeah, the ordinances aren't, the taxing legislation that you all will have before you is unchanged. This is just our
pure tracking.
It's just the tracking of it and the revenues bucketed together would be the same. It's just how we split them out in the revenue detail. And I actually wanted to raise one other item, and Councilperson Donahue, you were on the working group call last night. So in the last at least 10 years, from what we've found, the non-resident wage tax has not been accounted for in the budget detail. But we do receive that in EIT receipts. And so actually what we'll be proposing this to you all as an amendment. Again, the revenue projections will remain the same, but we'll be pulling from local wage tax, we'll be pulling in what the non-resident wage tax actual this year and what that percentage of the wage tax we're projecting is actual non-resident wage tax. So we appreciate that it's actually Bill Laser yesterday on in the tax committee, because again, that's when we looked back, there was never any revenue from that, which we thought was odd, but we actually do have that calculation. We just, no one's pulled it into that line item. Again, the revenue projection won't change, but the split will change.
That's actually that's interesting that you brought that up, and I think it's good that you're doing that. I asked that last year, and what I was told was due to an accounting. I actually wrote it down from last year. I looked back at the correspondence. It was due to an accounting function, and it was being combined with the tax. So that's good news.
Yes,
it seems that way.
Yeah, and then the overview is actually missing a sentence where there's the commuter tax that we don't charge a commuter tax. It is a line item in the budget. We left it in there as it's something that we'll be considering as a tax working group, but there's no.
Oh,
there's no revenue, and those two things are easy to confuse.
I think you froze a little bit in that last sentence.
There we go. Yeah.
So that commuter tax will remain blank, but we'll adjust that non-resident, and we'll propose that to you. And I'll be interested to see what that number. I don't think it'll be a large number. That's another thing that through working with you all in the tax working group, we can figure out how to properly collect that, or as time goes on, do we change that to a different type of tax?
Thank you. Any other questions on pages 28 to 32 on the revenue side of things?
I have a couple more on the.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kyle.
So on the wage tax, through just using the number through September, it seems like we're down about 3% in collections.
Yeah.
And so if you use that number, then, just forecasting out for the fourth quarter, it would seem that we're just down 3% overall, but in your budget projections, you have that down about 9.5%.
Yeah. So overall, so we looked at the economic forecast going into next year, and I think Councillor Dorrance, you were on the pension call too yesterday, and that's one of the reasons I asked, the pension analysts as well, the same question is, what's it looking like from this year to next year generally? And it seems that, the idea is I think we're going to have a similar pattern right through the first half of the year, and the effect of the unemployment may be greater than the first half of next year, because I think people are trying to recover, right? The economy is trying to recover in the second half of this year. Obviously, it's stumbling again right now. Things are already starting to shut down. So again, this has been obviously very conservative on that number, and so the numbers that we're seeing from the Department of Labour Industry, there's a big range, obviously through the pandemic periods where it goes from kind of 7% up to like 17%. So we put a figure in there which is a bit more conservative. So overall we're looking at total for local taxes, so you take that into account, just around 5%, right? A 5% reduction. But the biggest portion of that, as you say, is going to be probably from EIT. So it is a conservative number. Yeah.
Okay. Was there any reason for the decrease in the pilot number? in the line item?
Decrease from.
Yes.
Down about 44,000.
That was I wanted to only capture what we have been pledged specifically. That was Carl and I working out how we would approach that. Well, we sent all those letters out to all the tax exempt organizations. And we've gotten, soft pledges around some things, but I only wanted to include the University of Scranton and Luther Woods senior housing, which are Luther Woods physically gave us a check already, and we've had a conversation with the university as well.
Does Geisinger give anything?
Not specific to pilot funds, but and excuse me, the University of Scranton does not call them pilot funds, so I should, we're putting them at and that line item, but to them they have some other word they use. We'll be asking Geisinger for help with a combination of the public health coordinator and probably some of our public safety infrastructure.
Didn't Geisinger commit to some sort of streetscape project on Mulberry Street?
Yep. And it's funny you say that, Councilperson, because we're actually on our way up there tomorrow. Our meeting with them about that has been kicked for a variety of reasons in the last few months, but we're meeting with them tomorrow, and we're working on that with them. So they've got lots of plans up there.
Yeah. But to your point, I think a lot of organizations right now are looking obviously very closely at their financials as they go into next year, and just thought it's prudent to take that line item down. And again, there may be some positives, but certainly I think most organizations are being conservative at the moment.
And then also, I don't want to get too far off topic, but again, Councilperson Conahue, so on the tax working group last night, they brought up the HUP review, which you and I and Katie Gilmartin and others had spoken about, beginning of the year pre-COVID. Mary Jo Sheridan is going to work with Pat Laffey to see if he maybe has a base for an RFP. And Mary Jo's going to work up an RFP that we can all review together to see about getting that done next year.
And that really shouldn't be too expensive. It's really just postage, processing the list going out and then processing what comes back.
Yeah.
But, there probably should be some form letters out there on that.
Right.
Yeah. And anything that you've looked into, Mary Jo Sheridan is I think she's MJ Sheridan at ScrantonPA.gov. She'll start working on that, but I think it's a good project for all of us, including the school district, for next year.
Yes. And then just on refuse, I think we're just going to have to talk at some point about the process that we're going through in terms of the data to make sure that we're not, double billing people.
Yeah.
Because, I know I always use my house as an example because I have two separate lots. One has the structure, one has the land, but I get two separate tax bills. And I know that's the case, throughout the city, especially because of the land bank, people just buying, parcels and adding to their land throughout the years. So just to make sure we don't overbill there. And then also the discount with that on the tax bill, it's only 2%, but previously it was 10% when it went from 30 or 300 down to 270. So is there any options we could do there? I'm sure it's probably hard to separate that out.
But I know
still on the tax bill, I guess. But.
Yeah, no, there is obviously there are options. Yeah, definitely. And I think to your point, it's all about having the correct data, right, as well, from the billing perspective. And certainly that's something which I found obviously we struggle with, and I know it's very frustrating for residents in terms of the wrong billing. So one of the things obviously going into next year, we've already started to partner, with a single tax office on this, and the intent is to really scrub the data and make a change, obviously, in the quality of the information that we have, especially as we start to migrate right into our new operating system. And I think the processing itself of the billing and the collection, I think what I'm seeing is that where we've had errors, those errors have just carried across year on year. And I think that's what's most frustrating, right, for most residents. So what we're putting in place is, and this is where we've got the additional help as well you'll see in the budget, right, in the Treasury, we have a constituent services person And again, one of the intents of that position is to correct the problem. So one of the things, we're always going to have some issues until our data is clean, but there's nothing worse than carrying across year after year the same problem. So we're putting in place the correction, a resource and processes to correct the problem. So at least you've only got that issue for the next time that we get that, because it is frustrating, and obviously it's very costly as well, right, from the city perspective, as well as from the time and effort, from our residents.
Well, I think that, it's important to point out that, to start off there, once the new operating system comes in, it's important that we properly train, city employees to use the operating system correctly. Because you're right, it's the master list on all of our data that's normally screwed up, and then, everything else is then screwed up then down the line from that.
That's it.
And we want to, we're establishing a really good working relationship with the single tax office. And as we all know, we got to work really well with the county as well as we put all these things together and make sure all of our systems are as clean and easy to use as possible. So it's definitely on our minds too. And yeah, any thoughts that you have on that would be really helpful.
And then just, I think over the next couple of weeks, transitioning to putting the refuse onto the tax bill, I think we're going to have an executive session to go over some of the litigation.
Yep, we can do that.
Related issues.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, we should have that on Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah, we.
Joe about the issue earlier today. I'll coordinate with Joe O'Brien.
Okay.
That works.
Yep.
Any other questions on revenue, pages 28 to 32?
This is a really minor issue, but I just have a real quick question. What's the child care revenue? It's on page 30.
I think
$5,000 to $7,500.
yeah, so I think it's the sorry. Yes, license. It's a licensing for those.
Oh, I got you. Licensing fee.
Yeah, it's like a permit to to have that business. Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in real quick and just piggyback a little bit off of what Kyle said. So I know Kyle said, lots, maybe one property with two lots. So we got to be careful with the data so they don't get billed twice. And I know, and I had complaints this year of houses that might have been a double 20 years ago, but it's a single now. So my concern is they should be identified first, hopefully, because if this is going to be rolled into the tax bill, then in essence, it's going to be rolled into people's escrow accounts. So how do you fix an escrow account when you're being charged twice once it's set up? You know the amount of time and effort that might take trying to contact your mortgage company and say, hey, you know what? You can't take this much out because I don't have two properties.
Yep.
So I think it's very important that all this gets worked out first because I can see them problems happening down the road.
Agreed, Councillor. Yeah, it's like I say, I think right across, I think our city data sets, we have errors, and and I say I think everybody agrees is we've got to put up more effort than maybe we've done in the past. I think the fact that we are moving to a different operating system again is the catalyst, right, to scrub that data. And again, I think we still, there's no doubt, I think as we go into 2021, we are going to still have some billing issues. The approach we're taking is that those billing issues won't happen again, right? So if we find them, we've got to run them down, we've got to correct the data. Yeah.
And that's why that constituent services person in Treasury is critical to help with that process.
I do have a question on the revenues, something that I saw on page 34, and I think it was under the miscellaneous category. And maybe it's obvious and I'm just missing it. It says sale of assets, and there's a large decrease from like 1.5 million, I think, to 162,000. Where's that coming from?
Yeah, well, that's good. In terms of the anticipation for that next year, it's really about this year's budget had the 1.5 million in for sale of assets, which didn't happen.
The delinquent, it was That was the delinquent.
That was the refuse fees, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's
That's
what I
the
was wondering. Okay, thank you.
So, on that point, is that a plan of yours to eventually initiate that process with the sale of receivables? Because the way that it was explained to us last year was that the administration would negotiate with a firm. I think the firm they got the proposal from last year was MRS, and this firm would essentially buy up some of the delinquencies and front us the money. And at that time, we settled on $1.5 million. Is that something that you're still exploring, or that you're going to do? I know it's not feasible now for this year, but for next year, or is that out of the picture?
Well, for refuse, we've now partnered with something called Port Knocking Board, right? Which will be going through, obviously, for legislation. I think it's up this week. In fact, you should have received. Hopefully, you received the initial documents this week, but it'll be up next week. And the structure there is that it's not a one-time fee. They don't actually buy that debt. They actually pursue that debt on our behalf.
I know that, but the idea behind this and why it was in the 2020 budget is that this will be its own separate method of financing. In other words, does that make sense?
No, it does, yeah. But for the refuse, we're not doing that. No, that's not the plan.
Okay.
And those you'll see in the analysis of the RFPs that none of the bidders were putting that money up front to buy it and then go collect it all themselves. All of the methodologies are to go back to X whatever year we started with, 2002 or something. Go back and try to collect all of that, but there's no upfront fee. There's no upfront purchase like the current budget was projecting.
Yeah, the way that, and maybe this is wrong, I don't know, but the way it was explained to council last year was, I don't even know if that would have to be done through an RFP, since maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but the city did this once back in 2015, I think, and they negotiated with, I think, MRS, because they're the only company that does that sort of thing. But anyways, that's why it was in there, and that's why it was explained to us that way.
Well, definitely take a look at it. But certainly the five bids that we had returned on the refuse fees, I actually asked that question as well, because I think maybe that conversation, I had that conversation before, but none of the companies that bid, that was not one of their in their business model. But no, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at that in the future. And I'll certainly look at that as well, Councillor. So I'll look at MRS and I'll see if I can find out maybe what happened in the past.
But I'm not sure how MRS would have worked, because we have $16 million of outstanding fees that go back like a decade and a half. I don't know if they did something in 2015 with that.
Well, this in 2015, it wasn't refuse. They did some kind of deal with real estate taxes, but
okay.
This what we were presented with last year was, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but a proposal from MRS, where they looked at everything and said, that's why they based what was put in the budget off of that proposal that was given. I mean, I think we sent that over, or someone has that someplace, but
yeah, maybe you're right. For other taxes, I think maybe like real estate, for example. Yeah. No, we'll take a look, definitely.
So the thinking behind that too, at that point, was you sell the debt and you just clear your books, and then you go into a point where we're at now, where you put it on the tax bill, and then you're basically starting fresh in terms of refuse and then delinquent refuse. You're selling that asset. So if they sell it or if they bought it for 2.5 million, they had the ability to go collect the 16.
Yep.
So if they made 3 million back, they would make that $500,000 in profit.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the things I think to consider too is when we were looking at the refuse fee, was being sympathetic as well to residents for collection. And we when we were interviewing the various companies, one of the things we were really looking to is that the way our residents were going to be treated, the process that they were using was sympathetic. So, so I understand. I think selling off debt, it's obviously maybe an easy, quick option for the city, but certainly that's one of the things I would be looking at. Right, is again what the collection method is and how they go about it. But it certainly, yeah, we can certainly put that onto the radar, right? I think for other for other debts. Yeah.
Has there just that to build on your last point there? Has there been any discussion in terms of like creating like some sort of 30-day or 60-day amnesty period? In terms where if you just pay what you owe, we'll minus the fees and interest for 30 days, 60 days, just to raise some cash at this point.
Yep.
So when you read the proposal from Portnoy, we think that they'll be a really good partner in talking about all of these types of options. They do these types of things and these plans, different plans with residents all throughout Pennsylvania.
Just raise some cash at this point.
Yep. Yeah, that was one of the big points actually, Councillor, was, and when we spoke to, obviously the references, we spoke to other municipalities and cities that have used, these different firms. And that was one of the big things, was the opportunity, obviously giving a resident an opportunity, to kind of clear that debt early. But say there's a length of time before things move to the next stage. And also, again, you'll have the details, once you've seen the details, maybe what we do is we can certainly have, a caucus on that. What if you prefer to kind of talk through that?
One of the things I brought up Tuesday, and Carl and I spoke about it earlier today, was I think that we need to take out the $100,000 worth of revenue in the Keystone landfill grant line item, only because that's not actual. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's not actual revenue. It's equipment that we received from Keystone.
Yeah,
I think we need to adjust that.
So the question is, it could be on one side of the ledger as long as it's on the other.
Right. So yeah.
So if you're putting 100 on the revenue side, you have to put 100 in the equipment side under DPW.
Yes.
We were thinking of it as things that are in our DPW budget that we would be able to purchase with that. But I understand, and we're trying to capture more detail, but I understand that point. And we can certainly remove
its value rather than cash. Yeah, that's it.
But at the same time, you could put that value on the other side of the ledger too, and it equals out to the same thing. But
one of the major items that I wanted to discuss in terms of revenue is the payroll preparation tax. So that's obviously not, there's no revenue for 2021 that's included in the budget. And in the narrative, it states that that's something that you may consider in 2022. So can you give us an update on where the city stands with the conversion there?
Yeah, so the calculations have been done, in terms of what the rate would be based on the 2019 revenues. Obviously that goes to the court on the 30th of this month. That gives us the option to apply that particular tax. I think in terms of where we're at right now, and again, obviously this is in conjunction with the school districts. It's very important that obviously we have a consensus across school districts and the city. I think the next step is to have a caucus, with the elected officials in terms of what would the implications be for the different business categories we've got across the city to make that decision. I think that's where we're at right now. We have an ad hoc working group that's working on that. Councillor Don, who's on that group as well. And I think we can bring that to the table, I think, fairly quickly. I think if that's something that we want to push through for 2021. But certainly, I think in terms of the dialogue that I'm having, the dialogue I've had with representation from the school district as well, there's a lot of effort there. If we implement that tax, there'll be a lot of efforts on behalf as well of the businesses that are affected by it. So I think we just need to take that into account, I think, as we go into next year. And in particular, the balance of revenue from that type of tax is from, if you have a larger organization with a lower revenue base, it's generally going to be a negative impact to what the current tax base is today. So that's something I think we need to consider, obviously going into next year in particular, because, just because of the way the economy is.
Is that something that, Mayor, maybe you can speak to this. Are you both in favor of it though? I mean, the payroll converting from the business privilege to the mercantile to the payroll preparation tax?
I think that if it's a binary option, that we should convert to the payroll prep tax. It's a much better tax for us to be able to collect. It's a more modern tax. The mercantile tax, the business tax are just, they really don't fit, I think, the current or future economy. However, through the working group, really want to explore the bigger picture. Are either, so let's put the BPM, we're going to charge it next year. School district's going to charge it next year. Neither of us, especially the school district, can face a gap in revenues as it would produce, especially in the school district. But as we look to 2022 and beyond, is the payroll prep tax the best tax for businesses, or can we explore different ways to tax business entities? Is there something else beyond that might be better, that might have where the winners and losers are maybe not as stark as categories? And we'll see. I think that's it. The exciting part about this working group is we maybe don't have to look at it as two forks in the road and we have to take one or the other.
Thank you. But it's certainly easier to collect from the city.
Yeah, definitely.
But correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't the extension of Act 47 to implement the payroll prep tax?
It was a recommendation. Yeah, it was one of the recommendations that came through from Cal.
Jerry Cross is on the tax policy working group, so he's in the conversation. And as you guys, those conversations are, well, only two of you can be on them, so two of you are invited, and you can always sub in somebody as well as needed. But those are also on Zoom. The link is posted in the newspaper 3 days before each meeting. We'll have another meeting in a couple of weeks. Anybody can watch. So Pell is a part of that conversation. As we go through the next year, if we find if we find something that would be a better tax, we would work with DCD and Pell, and they're again already part of the larger conversation. We also, Pat Laffey from the school district is also on the working group. As you all know, and this group knows better than anybody, whatever we do needs to be actionable by the school district as well.
Okay.
To keep on that topic, Kyle and I were in a conversation with the payroll prep tax and with the school district, and maybe certain people won't like me to say this, but when it came to pilots, it got brought up, and Pat does have a comprehensive list of the pilots. And it seemed to possibly be an option to go after some of the pilots for the money that would make up for either one of those taxes, to look at not switching from business mercantile to payroll, but to maybe eliminate both.
And make it up with, you mean if the tax exempt entities paid in lieu of taxes?
If they paid maybe like a 7%, something like that.
I think that's a great idea. Let's write them a second letter to send it out. Maybe I should write them a letter every.
Getting back to the debt restructuring. How many debt transactions do we have right now that we can refinance?
We have our we have a 2002 Emmaus loan that we have that we can do. I think that's, yeah, and the 28, and we have a 2018 as well that we have.
2018 pension obligation bond.
That's it.
What are the totals on those?
So we'll send you this document from PFM. There's also a couple of there's like a 2017. There's a few reissues that we could work with. So we'll send you this.
We'll send you the worksheet.
And then PFM's coming on Tuesday, so we can walk through these in a little bit.
And when you're looking at those, what's the interest rate on those at this point in time?
I don't have that in front of me.
Offhand, would you know if it's time to look at these transactions anyway for refinancing?
Oh yes, it is, and that's so we already started this dialogue really before. It was always on our agenda, if you like, before we really started putting the budget together. So yes, it's certainly something we're going to explore anyway. Yeah.
So when it comes to the final budget that comes in front of council, are you going to give us a combination of restructuring and borrowing from?
So the
yes.
the
DLI, whatever it's being called at this point.
We don't know.
Well, we don't know what the number's going to be, but I think in terms of refinancing, if refinancing makes sense, it's maybe something we do anyway, right? If it's something like a standard.
Yeah, I mean, that was what I was saying originally. Is refinancing something that makes sense at this point in time anyway?
Right. There's some refinancing that we should do to take advantage of the rate for the savings is worth it in terms of transaction fees.
Yeah.
But in terms of what the budget that you all are looking at, I mean, we would like to keep these options there because we don't know what that looks like. And to Councilperson Donahue's point about 9.5% versus 3%, we could end up with really good wage tax receipts that make up a lot of that gap, where we don't have to, maybe we don't have to fill a $4.4 million gap. Maybe we're filling a $2 or $1 million gap, or God willing, none. So I don't know what, and we don't, again, I don't want to restrict unrestricted funds that are sitting in cash. And I wouldn't want us to preemptively borrow. I don't think that would be, or preemptively restructure here. I wouldn't want us to restructure $3 million or something and have it sitting there, and then the wage taxes come in at 2019 levels, and we don't need that money, right? I don't want us to be unlocking. I don't want us to be doing transactions that are unnecessary. So our thought is to have the budget have that revenue loss protection, where there are multiple options, including, fiscal relief. If we can get a check from the federal government and direct fiscal relief, fantastic. I just don't want to pigeonhole us into one particular solution when that might not be the best solution for the city. And again, PFM will come next week. I'm sure Pell comes at some point in this process. We've talked through with Jerry Cross about having kind of an open-ended solution here. And as you all know, anything that we would do to fill a revenue loss gap, we would come to council with that proposal.
Okay. Then my last question is the TAN this year. We're going to go for about $550,000 less than in the last few years. Can you give me some of the thought behind that?
Yeah. So in terms of the actual cash flows, obviously the purpose of the TAN is just to ensure we have enough cash to kind of keep the city running through its normal expenditures. Obviously, with the calculations that we did in terms of the cash flows that we're projecting, that's the number that it comes out at. So there is a worksheet that we have to use that kind of maps that out. So you can't just pick a number and put it in there. So the worksheets that we had, that's the kind of range that we came into, and that's where we got that number from. And I think the other thing, of course, is the PFM. Obviously they've done this many times for us as well, and obviously they go through the same process, and we follow their work instructions to get to that number. So we can't just, we can't just kind of up the number, if you like, just because we think it's something that's, that we might need to, do, or we just like to have extra cash on hand.
Yeah. So each year, as we go forward, each year it might stay the same. We'll see, but depending on what our projections are, it would fluctuate based on the actual cash flows of the city.
Okay. Any other questions on the revenue?
I just want to swing back around when we were talking about the delinquent refuse, and that it's probably not going to happen this year. I know there was talk last year, there might have been money up front this year. It doesn't look that way. And I realized what you were saying, Carl, that, you want to look at the process to make sure it's fair because you sympathize with some of the residents that are delinquent. And that's all well and good. And I get that piece, but I sympathize for the people that do pay their garbage tax. And when we're providing sympathy for the ones that don't, we're actually providing sympathy for Kenneth Bonds and the alike. So I just like to see this move faster or quicker.
No, I'm with you.
So,
you know what I mean? I just want to see this move quicker than it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
When you see the recommendation to hire Portnoy, I'm not sure if Carl did you include the commentary from? So I don't know if it's included in the final document that went to you, but we'd be happy to share the references. So when Carl and Mary Jo called through the references from this firm, I assure you that the law firm will be working for the other taxpayers who have paid their rates. When by sympathy, we mean having an actual person in the state of Pennsylvania speaking to them about how to put a plan together to successfully pay this off with empathy for their situation, but firmness in terms of a plan, versus what we don't want it to feel like for our residents who may be struggling, which, we don't want it to feel like a super, super aggressive collection agency that doesn't, offer the type of customer service that we would like to see. So it seems from the references that this company does a good job of balancing a very aggressive tack with
some decorum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in fact, one of the comments that we did get back from the references was that they are aggressive, and that's something that we dug into, and the intention was obviously to get aggressive in terms of getting to a solution and giving people options, like to pay those delinquencies. So yeah, the things they have a great process, and also from a cost point of view, they were also obviously one of the best costs. So, but certainly I think it's a very emotive subject, I understand, and I totally agree with the councillor. It's we can't subsidise kind of bad payers with good payers. I totally agree, and I think when this goes up in front of the council, this particular legislation, I think it'd be good for us to kind of walk through that and obviously get a full disclosure in terms of how we arrived at this particular service partner.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the revenue before we move forward? All right. So now I'd like to get into questions on pages 33 to 38, and this is just on the overall expenditures, and then we'll talk about non-departmental expenditures. We can kind of loop those together, and then we'll just go department by department to see if anybody has any specific questions there. On the expenditures, I just have a few things that I'd like clarification on. One of them, I'm not sure if it's just was an error on page 38. The line item for the TAN, it says 12,400,000, but we have our legislation for the TAN says 12,200,000. So is that an error, or was I missing something else that was added in there, a fee or some sort of additional cost?
Is that the interest? Yes, I think it's the financing, the interest for the TAN on that, I think. I'll dig into
Okay.
it.
Is that does that include the sources and uses, the sheet that we got that adds up all the bank fees?
Yeah, so there's 200,000 for TAN series.
Yeah. No, that's not that.
That's include, the fees are included in the 12.2.
Yeah.
Right.
The interest, and I can't answer for you if that's interest. I don't know which interest that is, but it's
Okay.
interest. You can get that broken out.
Okay, thank you.
That-
I guess, Bill, while we're on that page,
That's
like,
probably interest. I would guess.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
while we're on that page, I mean, those couple line items all right there, interest and debt service is $186,000 lower. And then you had, the cans, which are $700,000, $500,000 lower. Are we paying less in debt service this year? Is that what that is?
Yes, and again, part of that is what we are doing some refinances, some smaller loans that we have. So, and just generally speaking, the interest rates are much lower than they have been.
At any point in time, do you expect them to rise?
If interest
Yeah.
rates rise
Yeah.
back up, it will. But
not.
like as I said about using the financial crisis 12 years ago as a bar, I think that we should enjoy lower interest rates for a while.
Just a couple other questions on from pages 33 to 38. One of the things that I noticed was a pretty large increase in the other salary category. The increase is almost $350,000. So can you just explain the rationale behind that increase?
If you look as you go through some of the detail behind it, we're accounting for casual labor, for seasonal casual labor for parks maintenance, for hopefully we'll have some pools open next year. That would be for lifeguards, for maintenance here, not maintenance, but cleaning potentially here in the different buildings. We've been having trouble finding a cleaning contract. Those bids have not gone well, and we're trying to budget for some casual labor to potentially help us with some of the cleaning. And interns, looking at, I'm not sure if we'll have the SLIP program next year. Great if we do, but we're looking at trying to help us get through some of these issues that we have supported by interns. So for example, it'd be great to have make sure that we have a consistent intern, winter semester, assuming it'd be a college person, doesn't have to be, but assuming you have a winter semester, a summer break, and a fall semester intern in the Treasury Department, helping the team there with scrub that data, helping them make sure that we're capturing all of the things we need to capture to get that running more smoothly. And as we switch to this new enterprise system, there's a lot of things like data entry. There will be a lot of things that we need extra help with, and we're hoping that we could get some interns to help us with there. So that would be the other salaries in there.
Is that, so for the intern staffing, there is a line item towards the end of the budget. I think it's non-departmental expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
You have that at 120,000, I think. So is that, I don't understand, is that included with the other salary, or is that, it seems like it's separate in the budget. So the other salary is account number 4040. That's up about 350,000. But then towards the end of the budget, there's a new line item under non-departmental expenditures for intern staffing, and that's at
you're probably right. We probably would need to pull that. Well, we could pull that 120 out of boards, commissions, non-departmental. That could pull into the other salary.
Because I see when I have questions. I know how it's broken down within the departments, because there's a line item for other salary in each department, and the largest increase is in human resources. And I had a question when we get there, but okay, so that it seems like it's two separate things.
I think that we'll go back and check. I think that you're probably right there, that's being captured in that 120 for intern staffing that we're looking at is probably on the summary sheet on the board's commissions, and yeah, so we could make that adjustment.
Mayor,
Yes.
Mayor, so when you pull these others into the other salary category, could we please get a breakdown? I know you mentioned some things you might be possibly using the money for, like casuals, but could we get a breakdown of by position? So we know.
They're not positions, but by function, sure.
Just a breakdown.
By group, yeah.
While we're looking at those two items, standard salary is increased by over $1 million, and then you have that other salary as 300,000. It's up over 300,000. When we're looking at the salary increases minus the police and fire CBAs, that 778,300 number coming out of your narrative, is that included in this, or is that something different?
The other, you say, is the other included in that?
No,
probably the other wouldn't be included in that, but that standard salary of an increase in 1 million is the 700,000.
Yes, that's included. That's included in that number. Yes.
Okay, so if we're going to take, so that standard salary there, that's including the 700,000 in new positions and increases.
Right.
Fire and police.
Right. And we actually,
Yeah.
When I'm looking at the fire and police CBA, it seems like the CBA increases for, say, police is about 300,000 for the year, and the CBA increase for the fire department is about 260,000. So we're looking at about 500,000 there, plus the 700,000. Is that?
So it's one. I think it's 1% from January, and it's 1.5%. I think kicks in July.
I think Carl froze.
And
so we're back. I think we're back. Yeah. Yes. 1% from January, and it's 1.5% from July.
So, but if I'm going to look at that number and that increase of $1 million there, that encompasses, or the breakdown of that would be the police increase for CBA, the fire increase for CBA, and the 700,000 for new positions.
Right.
What?
Well, on the chart that I have on page.
In the narrative, right?
Yeah. So.
Gives you a breakdown.
Yeah, the narrative has that breakdown of 778,312.
Well. Yeah, page 16.
Yeah.
So it has the changes less the CBA increases. Right.
Yeah, so that 778 is new positions and increases, correct?
Yes, but it does not include other salary, because other salary are not positions. They're not full-time positions. That's, look, the lifeguards, somebody that might.
I got it. So that standard salary number,
Mm-hmm.
the standard salary increase should be that 700 plus the 500 from the police and fire CBA increases.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, right.
Okay.
And
yeah, we do have an amendment to make too, and for DPW, the CBA increases did not carry across in the version that you have, so we are going to put an amendment in for that.
And for all DPW employees, you mean?
Yes.
So what's that addition?
Yeah, so I noticed that one from earlier. So this is the CBA increases for DPW, and they didn't carry across into the spreadsheet that you have in front of you, unfortunately. There was a clerical error.
Okay,
so what is that, the total amount that has to be included then in for?
So I think 240,000, something like 240,000 that will be added to the total, that 778 that's in there as proposed new positions and increases stays the same.
And
And
I
then
can,
where are you getting, you have to change the revenue, obviously. So what have to increase your revenue now by 240,000 some.
yeah, so we put that in, we put that into the contingency.
Oh, as part of the
Yes.
The revenue
The
loss.
revenue, yeah.
So we have to change that as well.
Yeah. And I,
So
again,
that's going from 4.4 to 4.6.
yes, yes. And I can send that to you again.
Well, and
When you-
sorry, but Councilperson Gahan, you talked with Carl about this earlier this morning, and all of these things.
Well, no, I talked to Carl about maybe I missed the DPW part, but I know that the clerical union, there was three positions that were clerical that were not supposed to get an increase that did in the budget, correct? Like the maintenance person is in the clerical union, and
we did talk about that, yes.
and he got for that position rather got a $5,000 increase. That should not be in there, correct?
Well, that's something that we need to talk about, right? That makes sense in terms of the role that he has.
Well, is he in the clerical? I thought he's in the clerical union, correct?
He is, yes.
Okay. I believe there's two other positions as well that are clerical that, from what I can see, and I think we talked about this earlier today, that there's an increase there, but no other clerical employee got an increase. So I don't think you can do that, correct?
Well, okay.
We can't.
Okay, well, we'll work. The
If we can't,
clerical
we can't.
negotiations are going on, so I'll leave it to
Yeah.
the Labor Council and Carl to work that out. So potentially then if that's the case, then we would pull that out and adjust that in the budget. But my understanding is that you guys had spoken about the DPW CBA that didn't carry over.
Maybe I confused the two of them, but I didn't know it was the whole. I thought it was only three positions.
No,
yeah, and we'll, these are things that we're finding this week. We'll look in the expenses and see if there's other places that we can cut more deeply. We're pretty confident in the expenditure levels that we're at, but we want that revenue loss number to be as small as possible. So we'll keep working, because it's my understanding that you all make amendments towards the end of the process is when you finalize.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we would do that in December.
Okay. Well, we'll keep. The DPW increase is the biggest thing that has come up that didn't carry through. So we'll keep digging and see if there's other expenses we can cut.
Okay.
Now, when looking at that 778 number, that's not including benefits, correct?
I'm sorry, I froze. Did somebody ask a question? Or
Yeah, the 778, that 778 312.
That's salary only.
That's salary only. Okay, thank you.
So that's not total compensation, including benefits
Salary.
and pension. And these are all new hires and increases for people that were newly hired this year.
No, that's not.
No.
They're not.
Well,
Mark, that's fair. Come on.
I'm just asking a question. How many? No, it's a question. So the 778 is includes the 12 new hires that are proposed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't include total compensation. So what is that number going to be with benefits, pension, contribution?
Sure.
I'd like to know that number. Do I add 30% to that, or is that fair?
Yeah.
We can get the calculation for you, but these increases are not all for people that were hired this year. That's not accurate. We're trying to level set with management. We're trying to level set with people throughout the organization. The city clerk is on this list. Well, maybe we won't be able to, but we'd like to lift the benefits coordinator in line with the colleague in her office. They should be at the same pay rate. There are lots of people on this. There are a lot of positions on this list that are not new hires this year.
But I'll break out the benefits portion of that, and also can make that available to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the expenditures from page 33 to 38?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just have one. I know it's been a complaint of mine and Councilman Goggins in past years about properly budgeting for overtime across the board. Usually we overrun that, by a lot. So, and I see here where it's sort of, the line item sort of decreased here. So do we know what we're on track for this year and how we're going to get that number lower?
Well, the answer to how is the other directors and chiefs that are on this call with us is Chief Judge, Chief Nematka, Tom Priambo, and Eileen Cipriani. But really, Tom, John, and Len, that we're going to be managing overtime just better as we go forward. And I really appreciate their help with that.
But we also have, obviously this year in particular, we haven't had a full complement, right? I think in either PD and fire, and that's been the major one. Maybe John, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah. So, for instance, on our budget, due to some unexpected retirements and a death, and some people that pensioned out on work-related disability and non-work-related disability pensions, we've currently been running 9 members short since, I think, probably around the end of June, beginning of July. And those positions, the majority of them have been filled through being hired and are anticipated in graduating the academy on Friday, and will then immediately begin within the next 2 weeks after they have an indoctrination period, begin to affect the overtime budget. So, and we've been working with the mayor on timely hiring and projecting retirements so that we don't have those gaps, which should ultimately affect our overtime budget on the fire department side.
On the overtime, one thing, and it might seem small to some people, but I'm just trying to figure out why this occurred. When we passed the budget in 2020, there was no overtime in the law department, but yet somehow, when I looked at the actual amount spent, it was over $2,000. So can you just explain why that is and who approved that and why that was in there?
So this is something that we had to look into also. There's a person in there that earns under the threshold for salary, so that person is eligible by law for overtime. And traditional at least the prior administration was putting in for overtime for evening city commitments. And so we're working with Jessica Eskra and Joe O'Brien on that, and that we put that in the budget this year because it should have been in there last year, essentially.
Yeah. And did you transfer that money from another account into the overtime, or?
You mean for this?
For this year, I mean. Yeah.
I
I'm not sure that. Of the salary, yeah. We'll have to look into that, Councillor. In terms of how it got paid.
There is, Carl will look at it, but there's a lot of standard salary in the law department that we haven't used. As you all know from my memo, when we came back from summer, we're there's that assistant solicitor salary that is at 60, but we're paying an assistant solicitor 40. There's salary there. So that's where that, I believe that's where that would move.
Okay.
And we also have a couple of, there's a few other overtime setups in the city that we don't have the bandwidth in HR and BA right now to overhaul all of it. As we go through next year, we'll be able to take a more 30,000 foot look at it. And I think in the 2022 budget, be eliminating some of the overtime outside of, hopefully, there's a lot of legal stuff. I'm not a labor counsel, so I'd like it to have a budget for you in 2021 for 2022 that does not have overtime outside of the CBAs.
Okay.
I have a quick question about overtime before we move forward. So since we're talking about it, could you provide me with a list of positions that are exempt from overtime? Like clearly defined who's entitled to overtime and who's exempt at supervisor level, at a manager's level. Where does the overtime stop? Is it clear in these positions or not? It might've been here forever. I just want to know if that's the case moving forward, we can identify non-exempt and exempt employees for overtime instead of just, all over the place.
Well, it's not, I wouldn't call it all over the place. There are some legacy things like the law department that we're trying to manage for this budget and like I said, work on in the future. So, and there's legal definitions around it, so we can work on that. I mean, you all got the overtime summary. You don't see overtime in, there's no overtime in the mayor's office. I don't think there's any overtime in the BA. And this isn't like the overtime is really in the public safety departments, the public works department. But we can break that out.
Thank you.
Okay. I have one more question, and then if anyone else has questions, then we'll move on after that to the departments. ECTV, you have, and I know we've talked about this before, you have that funded for 20,000. Now, in my conversations with the representatives from ECTV, since their grant ran out from the Comcast franchise agreement, they literally cannot operate with that amount. So the amount in the budget that they gave me, which I forwarded on to you, they are looking for 119,000 to run the station. So, it's only in there for 20,000. We're going to have to find, I just think it's very important. So we're going to have to find funding for that. Otherwise they're not going to be able to operate as a public access station.
Of the 120, how much do you know how much the county is funding?
The county gives 30, but that 30, according to Mark Migliori, I can't remember where that goes off the top of my head. I was in conversations with the county to split that, and I have not heard back from their chief of staff yet, but that was an idea that I had since both the county and the city utilize ECTV. Regardless, I think it's important to make sure that they have funding for next year. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to operate. The other thing you have in here too is the independent police review board, and that the line item in there is for $10,000. And I think that if you can explain the thought process behind that, and what your vision is for the independent police review board.
Yeah, so the $10,000, we set that for, the Civil Service Commission, the Independent Police Review Board, and the Ethics Board are kind of the same family of outside entities that do have a lot of legal work to help us run the city better, but they're separate entities from the city. With the Civil Service Commission, those are higher. They do all of the tests for police and fire. And as we just talked about with overtime, we've got a lot of we've got a lot of folks that we need to hire to make sure that we're at full capacity in police and fire coming up next year. So we're running the Civil Service Commission at 20,000. The Ethics Board, I spoke with the president, and they said that $10,000 would be sufficient for them to operate for their legal fees. So with the Independent Police Review Board, I set that at the same level of the Ethics Board, because in my mind, if we stand up the review board, it's kind of a similar type of entity where the public can go to take an issue to the Ethics Board, take an issue to the review board, and that review board will hear that and potentially make a recommendation to the administration and council. So I set them equal. However, the Independent Police Review Board does not exist now, and it will take a lot of work to stand one up properly. You guys might remember back to the spring and summer. Chief Graziano was really helpful to me as we talked this through, that these things have to be done well in order to work. You can't just stand one up overnight and say, oh, look what we did for our community. In order for a police review board, a citizen review board, independent police review board, there's a lot of different variations of the name to figure out what that right is, who's on it, how are they appointed, what is their level of power. It really can run the gamut. And right now, I've got some people that are pulling together some thoughts for me. On December 2nd, we have a meeting. Chief Humetka will be there with me. Again, last Wednesday, we had a meeting with Black leaders in the city. They're bringing some thoughts too. So I'd be happy for any of you to join that meeting. It's 6 o'clock on December 2nd. We'll continue to work on that and work toward a proposal that works for everyone. And again, is not just put together quickly. When I put that 10,000 in for the review board, that the way I see it in 2021 is, some of that would maybe be legal fees to stand one up. And some of it maybe would go to legal fees to have an attorney present. But it's very possible that it would take us the entirety of next year to just stand one up. And I wanted to make sure that we funded legal fees in order to do that. And of course, anything that we do would have to be negotiated with the police union as well.
Yeah, I remember reading I think it was the memo that Chief Graziano issued, former Chief Graziano issued a few months before he left. And one of the things he noted in there was, I think that independent police review boards are expensive in his analysis, in ones that are occurring across the country. So I was just curious, and you just cleared that up, as to so the $10,000 really is almost to explore how it works and to see what that will look like. It's not actually funding the.
Yeah, and if we were to successfully find that model that worked for the city and the police department and the stakeholders, the community, part of that, would be what's the pricing model, and maybe there's some grants that we could get, maybe there's some community funding out there that we could get to supplement for this coming year, and then in the future, how do we fund something like that? We have to explore options on that.
So you said that one.
I just wanted to add, I was very happy to see that was there in the budget. I think in conversations I had with Mr. Dealey, I explained how, I felt like that was something that was needed sooner than later to get a start on, because of, the issues that we're seeing around our country. And I think this is something that is really needed for the community and to build better relationships with the police. And so I was happy to see that. And I would be really interested in being a part of that exploratory planning process to get something like that up and running.
Yeah, please join on it. So December 2nd at 6. So hopefully that's after your workday, you could come. We specifically put it after the workday, so we can add you to the Zoom. Councilperson Gahn, I think you're on that list already yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that.
So when we're looking at that review board, that does have to be approved in the CBA of the police department?
I don't know if it has to be approved by CBA, through the CBA.
I don't know what exact language
Yeah.
to use for that, but we certainly would work on that with the police union.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I know, like Mr. Gahan said, like my research of them, as they have been expensive, and looking up stories of them, I've seen more cities turn them down than put them into place. I know even Wilkes-Barre recently, as recently as this summer.
I'm not trying to disparage Wilkes-Barre, but Wilkes-Barre was an example of standing one up really quickly to say we did it, and that you can't do it like that.
Okay, all right.
But we're going to explore it over time. It's something we need to do very carefully and deliberately, and involve all stakeholders.
Thank you. Okay.
I just have one on the non-departmental expenditures. What was the reasoning for the cut for the Everhart Museum?
We've never been contacted by them. We are very supportive of them. We, help maintain NAOG, and their mission is really important. But it's tough for us to fund something in the budget that no one's ever reached out to say they need. If they've reached out to city council and
but I'm just looking through it just because 29,000 already went out this year. It's not a huge amount,
Right.
but I'm sure it supplements, whether operations or programs or whatever that they provide.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is. So we can. It's hard. It's hard. I was surprised, honestly, by how few requests for funding we got. I mean, honestly, really, ECTV and the two veterans organizations, I think those are the only funding requests that we received. And in a year when we don't have much,
yeah, I'm just wondering what.
Yeah, right. Unless they open these things.
I wonder too if maybe they had less programs this year with COVID. I know like ours had changed and there were some changes there. So I wonder what their needs are. Maybe they're not as high for next year.
Okay, good point. All right, so let's move through the departments now, and we'll just go right along with the layout of the budget. So we'll start with the mayor's office. Does anybody have any questions as to the budget for the mayor's office this year? I have one. Mayor, I know that you included a new position in here, Chief of Staff. Can you just explain the rationale behind that and why you think that is important?
The city has 500 employees, and it's very difficult to manage that without just literally day to day taking every single call from every department. Carl, as business administrator, has inherited a structure that we saw in the past, where the business administrator was the BA and the COO, and a really functionally the mayor in a lot of ways, and that's not a tenable structure for an organization that's trying to run at the levels that we're trying to run at. I need, and then also the BA, Carl, need to lift some of that management onto a chief of staff to help run a lot of the internal management that needs to happen. So you'll see on the organizational chart in the overview that we have neighborhoods, parks, and recreations, for example, reporting into the chief of staff. I'm trying to cut down the number of direct reports to me so that it's not, I think right now there's something like 13 managers that basically report to me. And then Carl, as you guys know, there's so much that he needs to do from a business budget finance standpoint, but with also all the operational items, it's really hard to do that. So a chief of staff would lift off a lot of the day-to-day management and upkeep and driving projects, driving processes, driving that overtime management, those types of things, and would be in some ways kind of take some of those COO, those chief operational officer duties off of the shoulders of the business administrator.
Okay, Thank you. Any other questions on the mayor's budget? All right. We'll move on to
I wanted
police
to
now.
add on, sorry, I just, two items that I wanted to highlight. So what we've done in the budget is consolidate some of the things like dues and subscriptions, stationery, travel and lodging, where if you're a department manager, you've got to go to the BA to get the permission for that. The BA's office will still, of course, keep track of that by department, but instead of every department having just kind of its own budget to run with, really we want to consolidate this down so that we're being more efficient and probably a little bit harsher. Now, of course, this year we haven't exactly had trouble with people trying to do travel or anything like that. That spending hasn't been there, but we're really trying to set ourselves up for success in managing that. And I wanted to highlight on the dues and subscriptions. So the Pennsylvania Municipal League, I know Bill and Kyle, you've been a part of that, and they're really helpful in helping us lobby at the state level, especially, really lobby for cities. And I would like to pay for us to be part of the United States Conference of Mayors. As you guys might remember, I went to the conference in January. I paid all of my own hotel and my own travel, and I will continue to do that. Should we ever get to travel again, I'll continue to pay those expenses myself. However, it's about $5,500 or $6,000 to be a member for a city of our size. And I can't stress enough how invaluable the US conference has been during this pandemic. The calls, the web, like the Zooms, the expertise that they're able to bring to bear on those calls, especially around COVID, and also the lobbying that they're doing, that we're doing all together for the federal relief, that direct fiscal relief, has just, it's really been awesome this year. So I'd like us to be a part of both of those. So that's the detail for that line item.
Thank you, and I agree with you on that. I think that's so important, and it wouldn't make any sense not to be in it, to be honest, because we want to be and be involved in getting ideas from other cities across the Commonwealth, across the country. So thank you. All right, I'd like to move on to the police department, and just two things that stood out to me here. If you could give us an explanation. One was guns and ammunition have dropped drastically from 43,500 that was budgeted in 2020 to 20,000, and through the end of September, we've spent nearly 40,000. Materials and supplies went from 21,000 to 10,000. We've spent 16,000 through the end of September. And let me see, the other one that stuck out to me was the animal control has dropped as well from almost 70,000 to 52,000. So can you just explain the rationale that's behind those decreases? Because over the past few years, they've seemed to be pretty steady. And
yep. So obviously part of the austerity view, look at what we're doing on expenditures. We've gone through every line item. First of all, on the guns and ammunition, actually that's one of the things there will be an amendment on. So we now have a breakdown for the special operations, which needs to now be added into that budget. So that wasn't clear. Yeah, so it actually will be a separate line item. That's the proposal. So I've been through that with obviously the police department. We now got the detail on that. So we will be making an amendment to that one. The other items, well, first of all, I think the materials miscellaneous stuff. Again, we're centralizing some of the items that are in that category, just for control. And again, also obviously we're looking at just reducing the amount of expenditure on those items. And for the animal control, similar thing in the sense that obviously it's an important part, I know, in terms of what we do for public safety, but it's one of the areas that, again, we're looking at, the prioritization of where we're putting our funding.
okay, thank you. And under capital expenditures, it was $435,000 was budgeted in 2020. Through the end of September, only $146,000 have been spent. No money's budgeted in 2021. And on the the comment next to that is patrol vehicles training simulator patrol.
Yeah. So this
Can you
is,
explain that.
yeah, so generally now for capital items where we're really relying on the grant funding. So that's why we didn't include that in the general budget here. So we're now tracking the capital alongside the grants. So as they come in, when we've got the capital, obviously we've got the finances to support that. That's when obviously we'll bring that expenditure onto the capital line. But what we didn't want to do is put in the budget what we're not sure we're going to get. So, you know, at this point, you know, just what we're seeing right now with the CARES Act money, you know, it's there, but we haven't seen it. And our concern is going into next year. This is one of the issues is, you know, we've identified around $37 million total going into next year for potential grants and federal funding. But in terms of when we get that, you know, we're just unsure. Now,
Thank you. And there's a new position as well, Deputy Superintendent of Police.
yes.
One of the things that I read in your narrative, if you can just explain this. So I know this is a new position, but the funding is coming from someplace within the department, is what I read in the narrative, I think. So can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so it's partly funded. So what this will be is one of the regular patrolman positions. We've reduced that by one, and that then will move into the deputy position. So that's partly funded, but also obviously then there will be additional funding required, obviously to kind of close out that gap in the salary.
So
Is that a union position?
That, I think it is a union position. We're anticipating it is. Oh, Len, you're shaking your head. Is that good?
I believe that's a non-union position.
Okay.
Yeah, the bargaining unit like myself.
Okay.
Yeah, that's,
So it doesn't. So the position doesn't have to be approved by the union. The creation of this position.
So that would be the other question. Is it in the CBA that this position could be created, or would that have to be negotiated?
it has to be negotiated.
Yeah.
Right.
I would note that former Chief Graziano pushed for this in the last contract. It was one of the first things that he mentioned when we started working together, is for, you know, kind of similar to the chief of staff needing to help the BA and the mayor manage. The police department has so much going on that to put on, and we have great lieutenants and great captains, but it's just so much to not have that deputy underneath the chief.
And Chief, in the past, there was a major position which was assisted in the supervision of the department, correct?
Right. It was a major commander. I think it was all terminology. It was never officially put in, but I think that's going back many years, almost 20 years now. But yeah, it was a specific position that was created.
But essentially it was right under the chief and to assist in the supervision of the department, right?
Correct.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. So we're losing a regular patrolman and taking that patrolman and putting him in the superintendent of the deputy position. Is that how that's working? Or are you just taking the salary and moving it?
No, we're taking a position. The plan is to take a position out of the patrolman into that position.
So that you're
Okay, makes sense. How about the grant manager / SIT clerk? You're moving that?
But no, hold on one sec. Can we go back there? Because then taking a position out of the bargaining unit would still need to be negotiated.
We have to negotiate it. Yes.
We do. Yeah.
So we're doing this before it's negotiated though. Does that make sense? I mean, what if it doesn't?
Well, we'll need to obviously work with the unions on this. Yeah.
Have those conversations already occurred? I mean, is that something that?
No, we haven't had direct conversations. No, I haven't had direct conversations with the union on this. But this position I think has been talked about for quite a length of time now, and I think it's something which I think the department understands. I think it's going to be beneficial. So obviously, but we do need to snap. Obviously, if this is approved, then we need to start to have that dialogue.
Okay.
So help me understand this. So the positions for 2021, this person has to come out of the union. So, and negotiations don't take really effect until maybe early bird this year. So would it have to be an MOU for this to happen within a month or two? Is that my understanding? I'm just trying to understand how this will actually happen.
Yeah, that's I think we're going to. You're right. The timing of it is. This is the organisation that we're striving for, and hence that's why it's in the budget. In terms of when that position gets fulfilled, yeah, there's obviously there's work to be done, right, for that, and it may not be filled by January 1. So yeah, the work needs to. If this is approved, then the work really starts, right, in terms of having that dialogue.
The grant manager, SIT clerk, that's moving to OECD. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so the idea here is going to centralize all the work that we're doing in terms of looking out for grants and federal money. And there's a lot of work that's done, I think, by this particular role anyway, outside of PD, and has been for a while. So centralizing it under the new community development organization means that, first of all, that role kind of, that there's some, a lot of continuity there with the work that goes on in that department. There's already a lot of communication that happens with that role and the current OECD. So there'll be a lot more support, and also we can kind of leverage the skills of the grant writer across a wider group of the city. So rather than just focusing on the public safety, we can also expand that to other areas as well.
Okay. And just going back to the union issue, since the SIT clerk is in the clerical union? I believe, right? I'm sorry, the SIT clerk is in the clerical union. So when this position moves to OECD, is that person is still in the clerical union as a member of OECD, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I don't have any other questions. Anyone have any questions on the police department budget?
I think my only question on the police department budget, and I think it would be for the chief, is when we're looking at that guns and ammunition, the rising prices of that, does that affect anything here with that, or the scarcity?
So Chief Nemeka, maybe you could speak to special ops budget, that the 23,000 that we'll be proposing as an amendment. So looking at this budget, we're new, Chief Nemeka is new. There's some expenses that were not captured in the prior budget. Not sure how they were expended, but they weren't included. And so this week we realized that the omission of the special ops group, $23,000. So thankfully not a huge amount, but an extremely important amount, and something we think that should be broken out into its own line item. And as we work towards next year, we'd like to do with police and fire what we have in public works, which is showing much more detail about the different kind of business units in these departments. Sorry, Chief Nemeka.
Well, to answer you with the ammo, yes, it is expensive, difficult to get. We have orders out there. We're waiting for fulfillment on some things. We do have some on hand right now, but the subcategory now with special operations it's not needed out of the guns and ammo for the patrol division, where we have special ops with their less lethal, other tear gas, things like that, and so forth, that they need their training and so forth will come out of that budget rather than that line item rather than the guns and ammo.
Any other questions on the police department budget? Just a question. I just took a look at. There's a little line in there that says change title to PS officers. What does that mean?
That was it. There's a conversation I think was being had, which was we're looking at again through the budget. You'll see we're looking at some title changes, was to public safety, but I don't think that's really.
Sorry, yeah.
That's not going anywhere this year.
All right, let's move on to the fire. The other salary has gone up. It was budgeted at $205,000 in 2020. We're through the end of September at $445,060.75, so we're way over. And then in 2021, you have budgeted $510,000, and next to it says EMS/COVID. So can you just explain how we've gone over budget and why it's up so much in 2021?
John, do you want to jump in?
Yep. So on the other salary, if you looked at the budget from this year, and you looked at what 2018 and 19 were, it was tracking tremendously higher than 205,000. So I don't know why it was set at 205,000 for this year. I believe last year, if I'm not mistaken, it was over $400,000. But other salary captures a couple of different items. It captures acting pay, it captures severances, and it also captures military pay. And we have we haven't had members in the military in a while because we went almost 10 years without any new hires. But some of our new employees are still part of the military, and one of them is actually deployed overseas now. So some of the salary comes out of that. So that's why that's increased. And we're projecting retirements, I think, as it stands right now, I think 25 members in the Scranton Fire Department have their time and age that they could retire. And we're projecting some of those for next year just based on the history over the last 18 years. It's averages around 4 or 5 members a year that end up pensioning out. And because of some unanticipated retirements that we had this year, that's where severances came out of, and that's why that is over budget this year.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense. And there's also going to be one additional, from what I can see, private in the fire department. So last year we were at 139, and this year we are at 140. Is there a reason for that?
That's a total number in the department that balances out the shifts, and that's why we're able to cut the overtime down as well. So it ends up balancing out the shifts appropriately, and it accounts for all the positions. So all 3 shifts will be balanced equally now, provided we keep the timely hiring of members and project those out, and that we'll be able to control the overtime budget with that.
Okay, thank you. And under capital expenditures, we budgeted almost $400,000 in 2020, and nothing has been spent through September 30th. And then there's nothing budgeted in 2021. And next to that, it says rescue truck and fire INP vehicle.
So those numbers, Councilman, are related to the $395,000 it was budgeted was for the purchase of new turnout gear for the department, which is, it costs us about $2,800 to $3,100 to put every member in a set of turnout gear. We have placed the order, but unfortunately the vendor has had a massive spike in COVID and it hasn't been delivered. It was supposed to be delivered in December of this year. It's probably going to be pushed to next year. That's why you haven't seen anything come out of it. And the line item next to it for the fire inspector vehicles and master mechanic vehicles, that's capital, and the rescue truck. I'll talk about the rescue first because that's probably the easiest. The rescue truck was in the capital budget line item, and that won't actually, payments won't come due for that until 2022. It's not expected. It's a 15-month build, so there'll be no bill that comes due next year. And as far as the fire inspector vehicle goes, by ordinance, which you guys have passed in the past, all of our billing has to go into a special city services account, and the money that goes into that account is what's used to pay for those vehicles. That's how we paid for replacement of the fire chief's or the duty chief, on-duty chief's vehicles, and some of the other smaller vehicles for some of our administrative staff.
Okay, great. And the turnout gear, we're going to pay for that this year, or how does that work? Because if we pay for it next year, there's nothing in that line item.
Yeah, so they're supposed to get us the bill because we were supposed to get delivery of that this year. And I'm also been in some conversations with the CARES Act money might be able to pay for that. So we're still looking at that as a possible option that would save actually the city that expense of that $395,000. But we've also looked at potentially doing a payment plan with the vendor on it as well. So, those are some discussions that we're still talking about with the business administrator and also Eileen Cipriani from DCD or OECD.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else have any questions about the fire department budget? Carl or the mayor, I have one last question on this. So you're increasing the salary of the fire chief, $16,071.45. So the total will be $100,799. Now, I know right now Al Lucas is the emergency management coordinator. The additional responsibility was put on the fire chief a year or two ago. Will that change at some point when this higher salary goes into effect, or what does that look like, and what is the plan there?
So we're setting the fire chief salary in the way that the police chief salary is set, which is a percentage above the deputy or the next ranking professional. So I think, as you all know, the fire chief's salary was far lower than the deputy chief, and I just don't think that's right with the level of responsibility that is on a chief of a fire department for 80,000 people. So we are setting it at that percentage rate higher. I think it's, I'm forgetting if it's 2.5 or 4% higher. 4, I think. So we're setting it in parity with the way that the structure of the police force is. As it stands right now, former Chief Lucas continues to be the emergency management coordinator. He's doing a great job with that. It's kind of project based right now, and I think sometime probably in the next year, and certainly in 2022, the projects that he's working on will, one of them being COVID. Let's hope that by 2022, that's away from us, and that responsibility would roll back to the fire chief.
Okay, thank you. And both the police and fire positions now are acting. So can you give us an idea on when the hiring of permanent police and fire chiefs will occur?
Yep, we just wrapped up our process for a permanent fire chief. So once we have a little bit of breathing space from the budget in the coming days, hopefully we'll be able to get that appointment up to you all for. We'll certainly get you that resolution by whatever the deadline is in 10 days or whatever it is. So that person will be appointed very soon. And the police we are in touch with the Police Chiefs Association in the state, and we're working on a best process and best practices with them. That will potentially be a bit longer, but fire chief will be appointed imminently.
Okay, great, thank you. Next, city controller. I don't have any questions. Anyone have any questions on the city controller's budget? No, pretty straightforward. How about the business administrator's office? Any question on the BA's office? I have one, Carl. Under the professional services line item,
yeah.
It's going down 5,000, but next to it you have financial advisor and then whistleblower $1,000. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so that just in there we've got our financial advisors are in that line item, but also in addition to that, we just obviously started the whistleblower account, and that's also coming out of that line item.
Okay, sense.
Bill, back to the city controller's budget, and I just see that there's raises to some of the administrative staff.
Yes.
But Wouldn't that staff be in the clerical union?
Yeah, I think that's the point that I was getting at.
Okay. I highlighted that.
I forgot to bring that up though. Thank you. The
Okay.
one position that's getting a raise in here, I think, is in the clerical union. So that's what we were.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just, same with, the city controller is an elected official, so we just took what he wanted to do and put it in the budget. So,
Yeah, we'll review.
but we can review all of these CBA, let's review all these CBA pieces and make sure the final budget is as it should be.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's a good point. I didn't think about that.
And there's a new position in your office, Carl, project manager. We can all glean from the title what that is, but can you expand upon why you need a project manager?
Absolutely. So currently, really a lot of the capital projects have been going through any of the parks projects, the items that obviously we have to track from RFP all the way through to completion. Right now it's very ad hoc, and we have people that maybe are kind of pulling them away from their current tasks, which again, I think is really kind of making us struggle in some of the financial areas and financial oversight. So this position is so that we can adequately take a project from, say, the RFP stage all the way through to completion, and again, to track against the budget, and also to manage any of the capital funds that we get through grants, because that's what, again, another issue that we have is just the tracking of any grant money that we have against these projects. And very often of what's happened in the past is that we're struggling sometimes to either qualify for the money because we're not organized enough to actually get that to get the timing right, or in some cases too, the allocation of that funding, right, is sometimes very difficult for us to track. So what we need a project manager that can follow those through, and also make sure, of course, at the front line level, that the work being done is actually being done to the quality that we're paying for, and that it's actually done on time. So that project manager will basically be tasked with putting phased project plans together, weekly tracking metrics, and then kind of monthly updates, which again, what I'd like to do is make that part of the kind of monthly update to council as well. So obviously we get a lot of right to knows, we get a lot of questions from council on projects, and quite rightly. So we need the appropriate governance for that.
So the department heads, or managers, so you're taking that off of their shoulders, I guess, managing, like, let's say a project that was in the LIPS department that they were doing, or DPW or something like that. So now all that responsibility is transferred up to the project manager. Is that?
No. These are for the bigger projects. These are for the things that are kind of multifaceted projects, maybe multi-departments, and those that are larger.
Serenity Center would be a great example, right? So Chief Nemeka and Captain Lukasevich and I were up at the Serenity Center yesterday, along with many of Chief Judge's great firefighters training. A project of that scope, there's no way that Captain Lukasevich and Carl in his time, like, there's no way to run a project of that magnitude with little snippets of time from the BA or from the captain and the police force. And we've got to have some centralized project management for these big pieces. Novembrino is another example. And as we see, I don't want to skip ahead, but on the Department of Neighborhoods, Parks and Recreation, the parks manager is you'll see we're getting those job descriptions to you tomorrow. We're getting them all together, so we'll have that whole package. You'll see that the manager in Parks and Recreation would really, in the large part, be a project management role to help implement and prioritize the park study we're doing, so that we're really getting somewhere with these projects. I mean, the Pocket Park is another great example of something that the VA project manager would be able to take the ball, and the folks before have done a great job with where they can, but it's been on Jessica Estro's shoulders for years, right? To deal with all the stuff she has to do in the law department and then try to also project manage. It's just a difficult task.
And these are non-OECD projects? right?
Well,
These,
not necessarily. I mean, I think because I think in some cases where we've got OECD obviously funding, I think it makes sense to still, you still need to manage those projects on behalf of the city. So yeah, we don't want to make it just kind of very specific to non-OECD stuff.
Okay. Any other questions on the BA's office? All right, and we'll move on to human resources. I have a couple questions, but I'll open it up to anyone else that want to hog on there. Any questions on HR? All right, I have a couple questions here. So one, in professional services, it's going up from 130,000 to 200,000, and it says include WTW and HR support. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so the Willis Towers Watson, our new healthcare consultant broker. So their fee for 2021 is 100,000. So that's gone into that budget line item, and so obviously we can track that. And then also generally we have kind of HR, any consulting, any support that we get. That's for that item. We're anticipating next year, obviously, as we build out, especially the new operating system, we're anticipating that we're going to need some support there, from content experts, from HR experts to give us guidance on that.
So that one, Carl, you were saying Willis Towers Watson does fill in a lot of the HR support, and we're going to get a lot of HR support from them.
They do, yeah. So in there, that's not a direct fee to them. They have just it's 100,000, and that's just the total fee. And they do obviously they do some consulting work. They will be helping with the onboarding metrics and things like that. Yeah, so some of that, some of the things we don't do today, we will have from Willis Towers Watson, but the additional cost support is kind of for other services for HR.
Do you know how that breaks down, Carl, in terms of how much the Willis Towers Watson and HR support, what the numbers look like?
I can find it. I can certainly dig that out for you. Yeah, in terms of what it is.
Okay.
Yep, I'll make sure we do.
Thank you. Any other questions on the Human Resources Department?
Just one. So during the bidding process, was that part of the bidding that looking for support from this from Willis Towers? I don't understand.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, when it comes to the confidential administrator and the public health coordinator, is that included in this?
What do you mean included?
I didn't get a chance to look at this one here in depth, but I mean the public health coordinator is under the human resources director, as well as the confidential administrator. Is that included in this budget expenditures piece on human resources?
Well, the confidential assistant is included in the standard salary. The public health coordinator has no costs attached to it, as I will be basically fundraising for that position, salary and benefits.
is within professional services, that doesn't include the labor council, does it? Outside labor council?
No,
you'll see that in the law department budget.
Separate, yeah.
Which we did make that note, I think, in the law department.
No, I'm sorry, you did.
Oh, you're fine.
Any other questions on HR? All right. Okay, information technology, the IT department. Any questions on the IT department? Can you explain the one line item here? The cost for telephones is going from 245 to 265, and there's a sidebar here that says includes 22 city emergency phones for $12,000. Could you explain what that is?
Yep. So the cell phones, like this, well, this is an iPhone, but so the contract that we have with our carrier is we're on FirstNet, which is AT&T, which means that if there were some sort of natural disaster where the phone lines went down or where those phone lines were taken down for emergency purposes, I would still, mayor, and we have the list of the 22. As mayor, I would still be able to communicate with the BA, with the solicitor, with the controller, with Chief Judge, with Chief Nemetka, with Tom Priambo and Chris in DPW. We'd be able to continue, have continuity of operations in an emergency. So we can get you guys that list. Again, the controller and I are the ones that need to sign an emergency declaration. For example, we need the solicitor to draft it up. I think it's important that we have that first net capability. So the phone is $45 per month for each line. The phones themselves are no cost. It's the monthly fee. So we've put those together. We've added that in there. Longer term, the phone system that we have, at least here at City Hall, is in pretty rough, outdated shape. It's not something that we're going to be able to take on next year. But I think there's going to be some cost savings there that we'll be able to tackle. And potentially, if we have a full complement of IT managers this year, once we get that new operating system up in that first half or 2/3 of the year, potentially they could start working on the phones, and maybe we'd start seeing some savings in 2022.
Mayor, if I could just add on the FirstNet phones, that it would give us priority in an emergency, rather than the civilians out there, the general public. When an emergency does hit, of course, those phone lines are going to be flooded with people trying to call everyone to see if everybody's okay. But it would give the first responders, anybody that's on the FirstNet network, priority over anyone else. So that's why we're first responders. We all have that, and that's the benefit to those FirstNet lines.
Oh, so the police department chief already has that or had that in place prior to these phones?
We have access as first responders to that FirstNet.
Oh, okay.
It's not. I have it on my phone, my personal phone. But being a first responder, we have access to that, and that would give the mayor, anybody else on that network, priority over anyone else.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions on the IT department? So we have two new positions here: the network systems manager and the systems administrator. I think it was explained in the narrative. But Carl, can you just talk about the updating, how important it is to upgrade the operating system? I see in the professional services line item we're up to $245,000 for the system upgrade, but I know we had the cyber attack recently. Can you just touch upon that for a moment? Oh, I'm sorry. I think you're muted.
Are we good? Sorry about that. We had a bit of technical glitch. Yeah. So obviously, with the it's obviously two big items from an IT perspective. One is that the upgrade of our overall system, but then you mentioned too is the management of that system day to day is something that we need to do a better job of to leverage it, and certainly from an emergency services perspective. First of all, I know there's been a history, and obviously maybe kind of Len and John Judge can maybe comment on this too. This has been a constant worry for the city in terms of the connectivity and the availability of the technology when we need it. So this is why we do want a dedicated public safety technician, first of all, because it's very distinct work, and in the sense that we now have pretty much like mobile offices, in all of our patrol vehicles, and the technology for capturing information, the dispersion, and the retention of that information, of sensitive information. So it's got its own kind of little world to it. So we need a specialist there, and that also should reduce some of our consulting services, for that particular part of the expenditure as well. The second thing then is when we invest in the infrastructure, which we're going to next year, as you mentioned, the cyber attack we had this year, we need to have the network managed on a more consistent basis. So what we're going to have on the the back end of the systems is all of the hardware and the software integration, the ongoing monitoring of that. And then for the help, the necessary help desks, and when there's issues with connectivity, we need someone that's is specifically kind of available to work on that as well. So yeah, just generally, and yet this, when you look at comparative, I suppose, support mechanisms for IT systems, we're still very, very lean. But it's important we have these people in-house so that they're very familiar with our products. And one thing we found during the cyber attack is it takes time for an outside service to actually understand how your network works, how things talk to each other, how things are integrated. So, we need people that understand our systems, obviously inside out, and obviously can manage it day to day so that we can fully utilize them. And just, in terms of having the system up and running, the efficiency improvements alone, are going to be pretty substantial. And again, maybe Chief Nemetka and Chief Judge, if you have any comments on that in terms of why we need to do it.
Yeah, I would say first, probably our single biggest limiting factor right now has been the lack of IT support, and not for any other reason than the simple fact is they're spread so thin because they have to do so much within the city. So from an efficiency and response perspective on the fire department side, there's several solutions that we should already be involved with and implemented so that we can have better response times throughout the city. And, that's going to ultimately affect our ability to mitigate incidents better. So to have that dedicated person between us and police, which I'm sure Chief Nemetka is going to echo the same sentiments, to have that is going to be invaluable for just an efficiency and effectiveness as a department.
Right, like Chief Judge said, IT spread very thin. Our cars out there with the computers, that's our mobile office out there. Everything's coming in through the computer-aided dispatch, the CAD system from the dispatchers. We get all the alerts from them. It's all silent. We don't have to put over the air all the different flags that are out there. A person with a gun in a house, or multiple times we've been there, emotionally disturbed person. All this stuff, it could be silently dispatched to the officers in the cars. But this technology, if it's not working, they have to use the radio. They have to give it away. So it could compromise, the officer's safety as well as the person you're trying to go and aid. So they can prepare for an ambush or things like that. So it's so important to have this person here on a regular basis to make sure our equipment's up and running and function the best we can so we can serve the public the way we should be.
Thank you. Yeah, I just know from the last few years seeing the major upgrade in both the fire and the police department in terms of technology. So, and that's the world we live in. So that makes sense to me. Any other questions on the IT department? Okay. Treasury department. Any questions on the Treasury department? And Carl, you explained talked about the position, the constituent services position there. So.
Yes. Yeah.
No questions? Okay. OECD. Any questions on OECD? I have a few. So can you just explain again, Carl, or maybe Eileen can, I know Eileen Cyprian, Director Cyprian is on the call, how this works again with the salary increase for the director. It's my understanding, based on our conversations last week, that the way it works is the city picks up a certain percentage and then HUD picks up a certain percentage. Can you just go through that again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we get the numbers for a moment. You got it all. Just pull the sheet. Sorry about the salary. But yeah, so obviously the breakdown is that HUD will obviously pays for the majority, and but the fact that we're expanding the role of the community development organization, and also there'll be LIPS reporting, the old LIPS reporting in this department, and having like parity with from a senior management perspective. We felt that it was appropriate that we increase the salary for that position. So obviously what the city's now doing is we will be paying the difference between the HUD salary and the salary that the city believes that is commensurate with this particular position. I'm just looking for the actual number on my sheet here.
So I think it's $57,158.20.
Right. Yeah, and that includes also the contribution to for the grant as well, for the grant writer. So we have some of the grant writer that's been moved. Also, HUD will pay for a portion of that.
Okay, so it's only those two positions that the city is contributing any additional money for in OECD, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. How about the public service ESG specialist? It was my understanding when some of these positions were furloughed that position was going to be eliminated. Was a decision to bring that back, or?
Those positions, the positions that we furloughed were eliminated for the year. So it wasn't necessarily that they were eliminated permanently.
Mayor, if I may, we're actually retitling that a position in there. The ESG work has been rolled into the work of the home specialist.
Oh, okay, that's what I was referring to. Yeah, because I remember that when the furloughs happened, that was what we were told. Okay, makes sense. Okay. As for the changes with bringing the licensing and inspections department and other departments under the umbrella of OECD, yeah. The way you have it set up is all the department directors would report to Director Cipriani, correct?
That is correct, yeah.
I don't have any further questions of OECD. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. I'm sorry, someone else? Any questions?
Yeah, I would just note that as we have gone through this year with, especially with regard to code enforcement, that this year has been really about making sure that the city is following the rules and that we're getting things out in a more efficient manner. We're tracking things. We're getting much better there. So as we really level set and make it easier to do business here, the next phase next year with Tom Olewski and Eileen working together will be to look at the ordinances that we have on the books, the processes we have in place, and say, okay, are some of these too onerous? Where can we work with City Council to pass, maybe pass some changes to what we do in code enforcement to modernize some of these things as we go forward. So it'll be a really good project, not one that we could have gotten to this year with everything going on, but I think that will really be able to do some good changes all together and propose those changes to you all next year. And that will show, I think, how having development in mind as we do code enforcement will really help us attract businesses and make sure that what we're doing here matches attracting businesses and contractors and investment.
Thank you. You're moving an administrative assistant position from the licensing and inspections department to OECD, correct?
Right. So there's an administrative assistant in zoning and planning that we're moving up into assisting the director, as they have a lot of management to do. That assistant for zoning and planning. We think that longer term, not next year, but longer term, that would be helpful to have that position. But we wouldn't fund that in 2021. So that's the move, moving that from zoning to planning, or from planning and zoning to the director's office.
Okay. But you are funding the administrative assistant position this year in OECD for $30,000?
For $30,000, right? But that person will support the director, whereas longer term, we'd like to, which essentially would be creating a new position, longer term, recreate that zoning and planning administrative assistant. So I think I have this the star with the under city planning for that reason.
On the licensing, inspections, and permits department, the one thing that I have a couple questions here, but under the other salary, this is another line item that was not funded in 2020, and yet we've spent $30,000. Where did that money come from? And it's on page 50.
Okay. We'll have to look at that one. I can't answer that off the top.
And then we have 20,000 budgeted for the other salary for 2021 for the licensing and inspections department. What is that for?
Yeah, well, I need to ask Director Oleski that to jog my memory. I'm not sure.
Anybody else have any questions on the licensing inspections department? On the Bureau of Buildings, you have under professional services $20,000 for cleaning casuals.
Yes.
Now, is that for the current? That's for the current contract that we have now with the cleaning company.
No, we don't have a contract. This has been a problem. You know, we put 2 RFPs. Since I've been here, we put 2 RFPs out. We've not got we've not been able to kind of capture a service for this year, and I think it's just been very difficult. I think to get a consistent cleaning support here. So what we put it in that budget for is that we're probably going to do something more kind of maybe casual, or do a small local business and try and capture some cleaning support that kind of that way. Because right now, the RFPs we put out, so we've done 2 in the last 4 months, and we've got no reply.
Okay. This is one thing that I'm not understanding. Under the LIPS department, last year we budgeted $15,447.27 for longevity. Nothing's been spent yet, and then you don't have anything budgeted in 2021. Yet in the Bureau of Buildings, we have $7,025.31 for longevity in 2021.
No, I'll have to take a look at the detail of that, in terms of what's carried across for those particular roles. But then, we'll put some explanation for those items.
Okay. I don't have any other questions there. Does anyone else? Okay. The next one I have here, and we're getting towards the end. I know it's 8:30. This is good. Department of Neighborhoods, Parks and Recreation, formerly Parks and Recreations. I have a couple questions here. I think I understand what you're trying to do, but if you could just clear this up. So we have a new department. You're creating a new or retitling a department. So we have in the budget, you have 1, 2, 3 positions in this Department of Neighborhoods, Parks and Recreation. Then we have another sheet here that says all of the employees that work under Parks and Recreation, and there are several, let's see, pool operators, groundskeepers, but on top it says move groundskeepers to DPW. Well, can you explain that? Because that is confusing.
Right. So this is, and poor Carl, I was trying to figure out, like, how can we fix this formatting? How can we fix it? The Finance Plus system just doesn't have an easy way for us to show this better. So it still has kind of 2 spots for these things. So we're not, as you all know, we've said that the administrative code lays out that there is a Parks and Recreation department. This stays true to the code by having a Parks and Recreation department to which we are adding neighborhood engagement. so that we're really reaching out to the community. We have parks all over all of our communities, and we want to make sure that we're emphasizing the neighborhoods along with those parks and really bringing that together. So the director of Parks and Recreation is a position that exists. We're now titling that the director of Neighborhoods, Parks and Recreation. A new position is a parks manager to report into the director of Neighborhoods, Parks and Recreation, that would really help on the project management side and help get us to being able to implement some of the things that we're looking at to improve all of our parks. They would also be working with the project manager and the BA on things like Novembrino and the NAOG pool, those types of things. That person, well, both of them would work with the supervisor in DPW, under which we're moving the parks maintenance staff. The current construct just isn't working. I get enough complaints from citizens, myself, and through you all, that we're not quite where we need to be in terms of maintenance, and we think that moving the maintenance piece over to DPW will help to run things more efficiently, and that gives the neighborhoods, parks and recreations team, a small team of 2, gives them the ability to really focus on the big picture. What do these parks, what do they look like? How do we fix the pool at Cup House? How do we get Novembrino up and operational? And then what recreation programs do we have? What are the festivals that we can have? What are those things that we can be doing for kids and for the community that we're not doing now? And how do we involve the neighborhoods? So the director of Neighborhoods, Parks and Recreation will run the Mayor's Volunteer Corps. They'll run the neighborhood initiative with those pop-up city halls. They'll do those neighborhood engagements on top of the Parks and Recreation programming, so that we're really focusing that work to helping the community. And right now it's just parks maintenance, which is so important, but it's really 2 different things in our minds.
So who supervises the groundskeepers now? The DPW director?
Yeah, so actually, obviously Director Fiambo is already on the call. So the plan here is that there'll be some shared, obviously, supervision in the currently DPW organization. Yeah, so those 7 positions will come under DPW, and because today there's already crossover anyway happening today, so that will go. I think we're going under the highway under the highways group at this point.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're trying to do here. I just don't know if I agree with it, because to me, you're hiring more people. You're hiring another manager or director or whatever in the Parks and Recreation Department, yet you're taking the employees and moving them under the supervision of the DPW. To me, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I mean, I understand what you're trying to do, but I just don't get why you would take away even if you're not fully taking it away, it doesn't make sense. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I think the key difference is the day-to-day activities, like working on the city, on the parks, in terms of the day-to-day maintenance of our parks, and the seasonal work that has to be done is having the resources that do that kind of centralized, right? Because it's a lot of the work we do is seasonal, obviously in the parks in particular, is that ability to kind of have a larger pool of resources to pull from, and also the shared equipment. The separating the 2 positions out that the mayor just talked around is really to focus on very much on what we're doing with those parks in particular, and how do we really ramp up the recreational part, right? I think of the parks and then any projects that obviously that go along with the parks of all of our parks is to give some oversight to that as well. So we have much more of a view in terms of really leveraging the 32 parks that we have in the city, rather than managing the day-to-day activity of cutting the grass and picking up the leaves and things like that. So that's the rationale.
Okay, so did you is there any clearance that you have to get or negotiation that has to go on with DPW? Because it seems like you're.
I mean, they're just the same employees doing the same functions. Now they'd be reporting to the highways supervisor, or well, this year into the manager of DPW, as opposed to the parks director. So we'll have a conversation, of course, with the machinists union, but the function of their role doesn't change. They'll report to DPW instead of Western Field.
But we have started that dialogue. Yeah, so we are having that conversation. Yeah.
I can't get myself over the part where you're hiring another manager, but that manager won't supervise any. You're taking the supervision part of it away from the manager that you're hiring. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't understand that.
So we have a parks study update coming to you guys. If we are really serious about fixing these parks, we have to have the bandwidth to actually put those plans together. And if we want to do it, we should do it. And if we don't want to do it, then we need to take that off the priority list. So
I think it's a priority, but from what I've seen the past few years, it's almost like I think there's only 7 employees to cover 30 some parks.
Right.
I think it might be a better investment, whether it's hiring additional employees or increasing the funding for, I know the funding for temporary workers stayed the same since last year, but hiring those seasonal temp workers to cut the grass and do everything else. It just seems like we're stretched too thin with employees. So my concern would be, I get where you're coming from and what you're saying, but you're going to hire another manager and they could have all the great ideas in the world, but we still only have 7 employees to cover all those parks. And that's been, chipped away and chipped away and chipped away at over the years. And I think that's really the major issue. I mean, this might work, but I have reservations about it.
I think that those employees could be more efficient, which is why we'd like to put them under Public Works Management when they're with the rest of the group there. And with the manager, I mean, that person will need to support the project manager and BA to work with the grant writer in community development to triangulate and try to push through funding sources and plans to fix up the parks. So that you'll see the more full description tomorrow for the manager position. But it's really to drive the projects really hard in all the places that we need to.
Any other questions?
With this one, the director and the manager will get like a task list or a work order and they'll send it over.
They'll work with the supervisor in DPW. The manager probably they'll do a set of schedule in concert with that supervisor, but a lot of it would be the director saying, okay, hey, we are going to have a pop-up city hall at Connell Park this week. So, hey, supervisor, please make sure that Connell is ready for that. In other programming, same thing. Then the manager would be doing that same thing, saying, we need to come by, we're going to do an RFP for fixing this playground. Could you guys, have somebody come over and make sure that everything's cleaned up, or that type of thing, where they're not the ones giving the orders, but they would be liaising with that supervisor in DPW.
Yeah, this is something I think we'll be able to expand on very shortly. Myself and Director Priembo sat down this week actually about putting it together, that schedule, right? So we want that visual schedule by park, because you've got the seasonal maintenance items, right, that need to be done, and we need to have a much more structured view of that, right, in terms of what needs doing where and when, to make sure we've got the resources allocated to that. And as the mayor said, then on top of that, you've got what activities are happening in those parks, so that we're driving the recreational portion in particular, making sure that we're giving the right attention to each of the parks. So, the scheduling piece is very, very important because it's going to have an overlay of just the general maintenance for those parks, But on top of that, it's going to be what are the events and maybe larger activities, improvement activities, capital, etc. will also be laid onto that.
The one thing I want to add, and maybe it'll be different next year, but the previous administration put in one of the budgets for an assistant Parks and Recreation director, and they ended up not funding it the following year because the person they had nothing to do. They realized that you need more actual employees because of the size of our park system. You cannot run it. You can't run it with another assistant or another manager or another. That might work if you had more actual employees in the department. So that's the point that I'm trying to make is there's just not enough people to cut grass, people to cut the hedges, people to do everything. They're just stretched way too thin. So it's just something to keep in mind.
I think maybe it'll be clearer once we have the job description, but I really can't envision this thing either.
Do you guys want to fix up our parks, or should we just scrap it? Should we just scrap the study? And
I think you can fix the parks up. I think you can fix the parks up without hiring an additional person to manage something. I think you need more employees. I get what you're saying, and the park system has been one of the things that I've pushed for a very, very long time since I've been on council. I live across the street from one, and I know most of the people that work in the parks department, they do a very good job, but they are stretched too thin. Nayon Park alone, you could probably have seven people that work within that department. You could probably keep them up there all day, and that's what I'm trying to get at is maybe this will work, maybe this idea will work, but having another manager who gets paid $50,000 a year to come up with an idea, unless you have the people to execute it, I think you're going to run into the same issues that we've consistently run into. So that's one of the ideas I had was not only to add more temporary workers, but to also look at what they used to do years ago when they had high school kids and college kids in some type of program just to help supplement that. And I believe that the DPW was always open to that. They've done that many, many times, and I don't know why that's fallen off over the years. But again, I've witnessed it over the last few years. They hired an assistant a year ago. Maybe it wasn't managed right. I don't know, but they ended up not going through with it because everybody comes to the realization that unless you have employees in the department, you can manage all you want, but there's not enough people to do the work that has to be done.
But again, project manager, you'll see in the description tomorrow. It's not them coming up with ideas. It's this person working with Tom McLean on the study and and then working with the rec authority too, of course, at NAOC, really trying to drive those projects. So that's the idea behind it.
But the resource, I suppose the most efficient use of our resources, our limited resource right on the parks is key. And the thinking behind that is to have the resources in kind of one place and to have a schedule of activities to make sure that we are covering all the things that we need to do. So I think you're right. I think we're looking at this. I think you're right. We accept. I think we agree on the problem, right? I think, and you're right. We need to kind of work out what that solution looks like.
So who does the day-to-day maintenance?
There are seven maintenance people in parks that are currently managed by the parks director.
So they're going to go over to another department, but they're still going to do the day-to-day maintenance.
So they're all part of the same union. So it's kind of a farce that there's a huge difference between them reporting to the parks director or the DPW director. They're all in the machinist union. They're all under the same contract. So the separation is really physical. It's certainly not contractual.
But the intention is to kind of leverage that.
But you're hiring an additional person and you're taking the supervision. It just doesn't make it actually, to me, does not make any sense. Okay, you're having this person report.
We're trying to have people to run the project. So okay. if you guys are serious about fixing the parks, we've got to have we've got to have a team of people to do these things. I mean, Novembrino, it is just so difficult to get these things going. Now, there should be a project manager in BA, so that should help. But if we're serious about this study and serious about getting funding, serious about putting these plans in place, we want to have a lot of Novembrino type of projects. We've got to have somebody that can run those.
Right. The project administrator here in Parks is a separate project administrator or manager from the BA's office, correct?
Yes.
That's what we think it needs.
Okay, and then the 7 employees will still go over to the parks daily and do the maintenance, correct?
Right.
And then who manages the day-to-day maintenance and operations?
Well, it sits under highways, which we're not funding the highway supervisor in 2021. The DPW manager will run that bureau, so they'd be reporting up to the highway supervisor, which is also the DPW manager.
Okay, and then during the winter, do we have festivals and mobile city halls and volunteer groups working in the wintertime?
In the wintertime, so mobile city halls we did through mid-October, I think. And we certainly would like to have recreation. I mean, once COVID is gone, we'd love to be able to have like a city rec league that we could have, at Weston. We have lots of basketball courts and things that we could be using even through the winter.
But I think that's why we need that schedule, right? I think it's a clear schedule of activities because a lot of things are seasonal. And again, it's obviously ideally is moving the resources along with that schedule, right, as things change.
Okay, any other questions on that?
Yeah, I just want to chime in for a second. I have a problem understanding this too. So my understanding is I thought DPW would always support the park when needed. So if there's 7 there and that's a problem, but moving them away from a department where there's going to leave a director and a manager with no one reporting to them doesn't make much sense to me. My understanding in the past, okay, if they
Sorry, I lost you.
Mark, we lost you. Mark.
You press mute.
You're muted, Mark.
It will not be silenced. It must be heard.
Sign language. I love it.
You're trying to mime.
Let's do charades.
Oh, there you go. Now we can hear you. You were talking, but we couldn't hear you.
Very excited about it. Whatever it is, yeah.
Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, well, do I start over?
Yeah, we missed a lot of what you said.
I got the whole thing.
Yeah, okay. No,
Whatever it was, there was a lot of emotion behind it, so we got that.
We got
my issue lies where there is going to be now a director and a manager of a department where no one reports to, or there's no one to supervise. And my other problem is, okay, moving 7 people from that department under DPW, where DPW would always help parks.
Yeah.
They're a phone call away.
Yep.
I don't understand all this movement, and then because they've already supported that anyways. So I just have a problem with having 2 management positions. No one's going to report to them. They're not going to supervise anything, just projects. Is that my understanding? Or
what is this to do? If we separate,
there's a lot of moving pieces here that maybe
right.
didn't have to be.
This is why we're having these calls, right? This is why this is important. And so I think we separate the 2 things. I think the easier one is having and as you point out, Councillor, too, is that there is a lot of back and forth, right, between DPW and parks when necessary. There's the support, goes either way. And that was really the rationale behind that, is having that kind of one group of people from a communication point of view, a scheduling point of view. It would make it much clearer, first of all, right, in terms of what support do we need in the parks? Do we need to pull people that are maybe doing, they're not necessarily groundskeepers to come in and maybe help out with some of the work. So just purely from a work schedule point of view, we believe that will be kind of more efficient. And of course, what it will mean is that we'll need a much more, an open schedule in terms of what's happening at what park at what time of year. And that's the thing that myself and Director Piembo and and Director of Parks right now are putting together. Then the other part, I think, which is I think that the two positions that we're talking about in terms of that role is very much more about the building I suppose, the momentum for the recreational part of the Parks and Rec, but also the improvement of the parks, is having that resource that can really drive those activities. And obviously because obviously our parks are important, they're becoming more and more important. So what we want is put some dedicated resources on the improvement of those parks, not just the maintenance of it, but the improvement and the improved use of those parks as well. So that's the rationale.
Yeah, something that maybe it's like working in the business versus on the business. The maintenance professionals work in the parks, doing all the maintenance, making sure that they're ready for what happens for the people, for the community, in the neighborhoods, for the kids. That working on those things, working on the big picture of whether it's big repairs, big projects, big programs. That's what the Department of Neighborhoods, Parks and Recreation would be focused, is working on those things, big stuff, the maintenance, working day to day to enable all of that to happen.
Okay. All right, thank you. I think it's safe to say that we all really care about the park system. We just have to balance whether or not, we want to add more management or bureaucracy to the equation. So we'll weigh that over the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
Okay. On to the DPW. Any questions on the DPW budget?
I think Law Department Council President Gahan.
Is that nothing?
Yeah, well, I just would like to, just because we're on Parks and Rec, I want to skip over that. Keep on the same sub. Any questions on the DPW budget? How about the engineering aspect? So I know that the plan is to hire an engineer, and to right now we're under contract. So can you explain the thought process behind that?
Yeah, so the rationale again is to have some real continuity, right, with the projects, and have in-house support and access. So maybe Director Crembo maybe wants to put a comment in on this too. Is a lot of it is around having that ownership of those projects, the obviously easier communication, and have someone that can obviously follow these projects through and have that competence in-house. So this is kind of the rationale behind that. But maybe Tom, if you want any comments on that?
Sure. Absolutely, Carl. Thank you so much. So what the goal here is to provide an engineering project manager that would assist the department with all the infrastructure improvement projects that are basically related to bridges, roadways, pedestrian vehicle traffic within the city. So as you know, there are right now in the hopper, there's about, I would say, 5 actual new bridges that are being developed to be replaced in the city of Scranton. So we need a point person that's actually would be classified as a civil engineer to guide the department and guide the city through all of those major projects, working with PennDOT and the engineering firm that is designated through PennDOT. And this is it's very interesting to note this concept of having a civil engineer being a engineering project manager working in DPW was actually something that was recommended by our current city engineer. The scope and depth of the work that is involved in being a partner as a host city with PennDOT for just these 4 projects is astronomical. Okay, and it's absolutely not possible to have that land on a department manager. So, it was identified a couple of months ago, and I've had countless conversations with our city engineer right now, and which is Labella Associates, and it's highly recommended that we move in this direction.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, this seems to make sense to me, but to put it in hard numbers, what's our current contract with the outside engineer? Is that for a set dollar amount, or do they bill hourly?
No, it's a contracted fee. The fee was spread out over 3 years. It's a 3-year contract, and our monthly fee is $6,300 a month right now. We don't get any engineering design, attributes with any of that. It's purely consultation.
Do they charge? So if you ask for design plans, do they charge you for those?
No, that's not even in the contract for a charge. What's usually recommended is that it's bid out separately, and they would bid for the project.
So we pay over $75,000 a year just for the contract, just for review.
For consultation.
Consultation.
Correct.
And you're saying that having an in-house civil engineer on that individual would get paid $75,000 starting on April of 2021, $75,000.
Well, that would be the annual salary, but it's prorated starting for April. Correct.
Well, I understand.
So,
and with that individual, he or she would do their own design work and plans.
Well, not so much design work on larger projects, because the projects that I'm referencing is with PennDOT. So they're large scale infrastructure projects, whether it's roadway approaches and total bridge replacements. This person would act as a liaison for the city in a professional manner as a project engineer credited as a PE with civil engineering. So we're providing the proper support for the city on all of these projects. Now, your question relevant to doing design for some other projects, that is a possibility as long as we can caption a project or professional engineer with civil engineering background. And if we had the proper tools in place in the department for some of the smaller projects, not a bridge replacement, but some of the smaller projects that we could also do in-house, yes, design could be an opportunity that we'll caption.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom, how many, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, how many temporary workers do you have at DPW, in DPW and in Parks and Recreation?
Currently, we have 11 casual employees.
And that's between both departments, DPW and Parks?
That would be correct.
Okay. And if a casual employee were working in Parks and Recreation and someone called off in the DPW would pull that person into that position to go on a garbage truck or something like that? Is that how it works?
We do not remove anyone from the full-time position in Parks.
No, I mean, if they were a casual and they were working in the Parks Department cutting grass or something, they would be moved then to fill whatever position needed to be filled that day?
If that was a possibility, yes. If we were really short-staffed for sanitation services, yes. Most of the time, the casuals are used to fill for sanitation on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. And can you talk
So,
about...
Hold on. I'm just on that point real quick. So then are we not pulling Parks and Rec maintenance guys out of Parks and Rec and putting them on garbage trucks on days where we need to?
As a standard practice, we do not do that. That hasn't been done for a couple of years now.
Yeah, I know. Yet last year and the year before, I know it was a little bit of an issue in terms of, manning power in parks. So if, there was X amount of call-offs on a certain day, say in July, there wasn't grass being cut or whatever at a park.
Right. That was an old practice. I believe that was eliminated about 18 months ago.
Okay.
To my knowledge, and in since my presence as a director, that has not happened. The park staff has stayed intact. And if we've had a shortage of collectors in DPW, we would utilize the casual staff that we have for that.
All right, thank you.
And Tom, can you talk about the addition of the flood control employees that have been added in the DPW budget?
Sure. The budget includes two new positions for flood control maintenance staff members. These two positions are going to be added with the one current position, but it's something that it's worthwhile to note that the current flood control coordinator position is being eliminated. That person really didn't truly act in an administrative function. They purely acted as a flood control maintenance individual. So we're really adding one position to the flood control maintenance. If you include the elimination of the flood control coordinator, who has already been doing that job, but we're just retitling it, we're rebranding it so it's an official flood control maintenance position. So we'll have three. That unit of operations is charged with maintaining the city's flood control systems and the levees across the city. I just want all of us to remember that we basically have a $90 million asset with a $3.5 million levy along the Lackawanna River. And with that comes obligations. We have obligations with the Army Corps of Engineers and DEP to provide adequate maintenance services and funding on an annual basis. So increasing that capacity in the personnel will allow us in the department to have staff members that are technically trained. So it's not just people going out there and cutting grass. It's one thing that council members need to understand, that some of these positions that we have, all the positions in the flood control maintenance division, they need to be technically trained on the operations of the sluice valves, closures of the gates. We have large pumping station down in the lower South Side area off of Washington Avenue and up on Merfield Avenue. So there's technical skills that need to be obtained or learned and obtained to do this. And to be honest with you, you can't depend on just two people doing it. So I'm proposing that we increase at least one. I would like to have two because of the severity of the responsibilities. It's a public service. It's public safety. Whenever we have a high water event, these are the people that we're going to count on. These are the people that we're going to count on to mitigate any of the stormwater damages, to make sure that we get out there and close the gates on a proper time frame, and also to operate the pumps. So that's where the technicality, the job function, it's not an unskilled function. It's not an unskilled job. It's a technical function. And we really need to have people on base to make sure that we can stay protected in a high water event, plus the annual maintenance. And we are charged. It's something that it's important for everybody to understand, that we have an obligation with the state and the federal government to maintain our tributaries, which we have several miles of the tributaries that land into the Lackawanna River. And again, just the Lackawanna River alone, it's a $90+ million asset, not including tributaries, not including tributary systems, not including the pumping system. We need to do a good job at maintaining that in case we have a catastrophic event and FEMA comes in and designates it as an emergency. We want to be able to caption all of that funded, or that relief funding that we would have. If we don't have maintenance personnel and if we don't do maintenance, we will not be able to caption that benefit.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions on DPW or from Mr. Preamble? All right, and thank you, Mr. Preamble, appreciate it.
You're welcome, Councilman.
Finally, the law department. I had two questions here. The professional services is going up really significantly, 225 to 400,000, and it says includes labor council. Can you explain that? Sorry, mute it.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to capture labor council. It doesn't need to be a separate line item, but we wanted to capture it within professional services. It is a big expense. It needs to be, because we have, a lot. We have 500 employees and 4 different bargaining units. We also have a lot of past issues that we are still working to correct, and we're working with our labor council to decrease the cost going forward. This year has been it's been a lot this year, but we've been digging out from a lot, which I know Solicitor Hayes is familiar with the depth of what we have to deal with. So we're working with Labor Council to manage those costs, but we really think it's important to be transparent and show the Labor Council and the other, there's other attorneys that we outsource some things to. Something that's been really great about working with Solicitor O'Brien is that he's bringing as much in-house as possible, so that instead of outsourcing, in the past there's a lot of outsourcing of counsel, and sometimes, there's a lot of cases where that does need to happen. But as we go forward, Solicitor O'Brien's really bringing a lot of these things in-house, which is saving us a lot of money.
Thank you. When the law department or the city outsources counsel, how are those firms chosen, whether it's for compensation or any other kind of case?
So we're doing you'll see soon, we'll have an RFP for the Insurance Defense Counsel list. That's something that we inherited that I think should be an RFP, and people should apply to be a part of that list. Other counsel, I can't speak to exactly how that works. I know we do RFPs when necessary. Remember, the first week here where we had to sign that emergency declaration because we didn't have time to do an RFP for the Act 511. But we did 3 different interviews to make sure that we were doing as much due diligence as we could, given the extremely short time frame before we had to have that briefing. But we do RFPs to the extent that we can. As you guys know from the Labor Council, that was an RFP.
And we have obviously 3 contracts next year as well from a labor perspective. That was the reason why we wanted to put that in the budget.
Okay, thank you. And you have, I think, one, not a new position, but an increased position here in the law department. Are these first assistant city solicitor and the 2 assistants, are they full-time or part-time?
So the only full-time solicitor role is, at this point, is the first assistant solicitor. The others are part-time, do not have benefits. So the city solicitor doesn't take benefits. The 2 assistant city solicitors do not take benefits. Tax solicitor, no. And as we look to hire someone for tax recovery specifically, that would be a flat retainer, and that would have no benefits either. So yeah.
I was just going to say, what is the tax recovery solicitor? What does that entail?
So the plan here is that we have a solicitor that's basically their compensation is subsidized by recovery fees. So obviously today, again, the delinquent refuse is a good example, right, where services do that. It's no cost to the city because when they recover on behalf of the city, their costs are also passed on to the payee. So what we're looking for here is this is an idea, right? I think we decided we need to be more aggressive, right? I think particularly on our delinquencies, collections, and in particular, I think things like related to real estate. So the intention here is to have a solicitor that is just dedicated to that. The fee, the 15,000 that's in there is like more of a retainer, and the intention here is that person will effectively kind of take their revenue as a compensation from recovery.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions on the law department, and that concludes the departments. Does anybody else have any questions?
Could I just say on the tax recovery solicitor? So that would be something that we would want to do an RFP for, and work with you all to get that not really a job description, but a scope of work, right? We also want to work with Pat Laffey in the school district toward that aim, and make sure that we're hiring somebody that is in the same way that we did with ultimately proposing to hire Portnoy, somebody that will be aggressive, but also respectful and thoughtful about how they go about these things. So that would be something that we would work together on. And while it's a position in the budget, it would really be more like a professional service, I think.
Thank you. Just to kind of wrap things up, just so we'll go back to kind of the beginning, just so I have this straight. The operating expenditures, the total that you have here in your budget that you submitted to council was $114,681,477.58. That figure is incorrect because you need to add. Do you have a ballpark of how much you have to add on to that?
Yeah, so I think it's gonna be 114,918.
And that includes what? All DPW positions and the clerical positions?
Yes.
There's a few things that came up on this call that would impact that number, so
Yeah,
we'll
so
have to
we'll
recalculate it. If we're not able to put in the clerical increases where we think they should be, for example, that would adjust it. If bumping ECTV up is something we need to do, of course, that would impact. And then we'll take out that Keystone 100,000, and we'll need to take another look at the DPW budget and see how we adjust. So there's some some of those kind of things on the margins, but coming in here, the CBA increase in DPW and that special operations line item was around 240, I think 240.
And then you'll have to rework the revenue then as well to find.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I mean we'll continue to look and see if there are other cuts that we could make to keep the revenues as much, to not increase that revenue loss number as much as needed. But I think that the default would be that we would increase that revenue loss projection from 4.4 to 4.6 or 4.7. But we'll keep working at it and keep looking and keep, every week that goes by, we have more year-to-date actuals, and so we can continue to flesh out if there's other places that we could come down in terms of our projected expenditures.
And last question for me, and this is something that's come up in the past about the audit. So we still have not received the 2019 audit. We get reports every week from the auditor, and can you explain why we still don't have an audit?
Actually, we have a meeting with them tomorrow. The plan that I had from the last week, it was going to be completed this week. So I have a meeting with them tomorrow. And yeah, what we'll do is we'll send you an update.
Okay, great. Anyone else have any other questions?
Yeah, when looking at, you guys said that the clerical piece might change, correct, in the last minute or so?
That was something.
May move with negotiations.
There are a few. There's a position that the controller wants to give a 3% overall raise. So that's one position that would be impacted, and then there's a couple staff clerical employees that we believe individually really deserve a raise, and we've put we put this whole budget together with what we believe we need to run the city well and retain the talent that we have. If the business administrator labor council, they'll continue their negotiations. If we need to take those out, if that was not something that we should put in there, then we can. But we're trying to there's some people that are going so far above and beyond, and we want to make sure that we're retaining them.
And then when looking at, you guys kind of jumped around from a lot of DPW. The positions in DPW, some of the title changes, they got title changes, and there were increases in salary. Now, are they exempt or non-exempt when it comes to overtime?
No, they're not exempt.
Because I see there's about, I'd say about $400,000 in overtime there. Do we think we should be hiring somebody more to these positions with that much overtime going on?
Again, a lot of this isn't. Maybe Tom can talk to this again, but a lot of this is seasonal, and and again, obviously, it's quite unpredictable. But that's again something that myself and the director will work on.
And then one more thing, like these are things going back, kind of like the couple things that I missed.
Yeah.
We're looking at so this is going back to page 34. We have the unemployment insurance is about 235,000.
Yes.
And I mean, I understand where that comes from. When we took a look at our savings compared to those expenses, how did we pan out there? We never really got the savings from some of those.
So those calculations, and I can send you the calculation that goes along with that. But kind of the overview of it is the payment that's for the actual services that are provided from from IMARC or whatever. Those prices are increasing, right? So we put a 5% in there. But what we've done, we've extracted the administration savings that we've got through Willis Towers Watson. And again, we were conservative. I think we reported a couple of weeks ago, it was around between 835 and 1.1 million. So in there right now, we've got the 800,000 savings in there. And I'm still obviously working with Willis Towers Watson now. And again, I'm being very conservative, but I'm hoping again that if those savings will continue to increase as we go through next year. But we did put in there.
They might be about 600,000 if you're going conservative.
I put the 8 in there because working with Willis Towers Watson, I mean, there's more. There is more. So after consulting with them, they said no, that's fine. They were very confident.
Okay. Is there any other questions?
I just wanted to show somebody who goes above and beyond 7 days a week, and that's Paul O'Hora. Is here right now.
Hey, Paul.
It's the garbage. So just
It's cleaning. Yeah.
He probably went for like a 20-mile run too.
Yeah, well, exactly. Right. Yeah, but we're so lucky to have great employees and to have the time with all of you as well and to continue to work this out. And I'm appreciative to all our department heads, chiefs on tonight. I know it was a late night, but it's really helpful to hear from you what your needs are and how you're moving the departments forward.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor, Mr. Daly, Chief Nemeka, Chief Judge, and Directors Preamble and Cipriani. Thank you for coming tonight and answering our questions. And we look forward to some of the follow-up information that we requested. And we certainly look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.